Council Chair, we are now live.
Good morning. I want to welcome everyone this morning for this joint committee on finance, commerce, economic development. I, Councilmember Derek Green, the chair of the Finance Committee, joined by colleague Councilmember Mark Willa as chair of the Commerce and Economic Development Committee. I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council hearings are currently meeting remotely. We're using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligentsia prior to the hearings. It can also be found on phlcouncil.com. With that, I note that the hour has come. Mr. Iannuzzi, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak.
Councilmember Bass. Councilmember Brooks. I don't know whether I'm having audio issues or if that's everyone, but I'm going to continue. Councilmember Dom.
Good morning, everyone.
Councilmember Gautier.
Good morning, I'm present.
Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Yes, good morning, Frank. Thank you so much for this important hearing today.
If you are not speaking, can you please put your audio on mute, please? Councilmember Gim.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, staff. Looking forward.
Councilmember Heenan.
Good morning, colleagues, and good morning, everybody who's joining us for this hearing this morning.
Councilmember O. Sorry about that. Good morning. I am here. Councilmember Parker.
President Frank, and thank you for that note about the audio because we could hear somebody's television in the background, so thank you, Frank.
Councilmember Quinones Sanchez.
Good morning, good morning.
Councilmember Thomas.
Can you hear me well?
Yes,
okay,
good
morning.
everybody. Thank you, Chair. Appreciate you. Sorry I missed the sound check.
Co-chairs Green.
Present.
And Squilla.
Present.
And I just want to make sure at the top that I got the right. We saw Councilmember Brooks on the screen, but I could not hear her. Can she try again?
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better.
Can I turn my mic up? Is that better?
Better all the time, Councilmember.
All righty.
Good morning to all of you. Thank you.
Good morning, Frank. This is Councilwoman Bass checking in as well.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Mr. Iannuzzi. A quorum of the committees is present, and this hearing is now called to order. This is the public hearing on the Joint Committees on Finance and Commerce and Economic Development regarding Bill number resolution number 200336. Mr. Iannuzzi, will you read the title of the resolution?
Resolution number 200336, resolution authorizing the Committees on Finance and on Commerce and Economic Development for joint hearings regarding Philadelphia's safe, equitable, and robust economic recovery from the coronavirus pandemic.
Thank you, Mr. Iannuzzi. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses, we have here for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing my co-chair for any comments that you may have, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Before we call the first panel, I'd like to recognize the chair of the Commerce and Economic Development Committee, Councilmember Mark Squilla, who would like to make any opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also noticed that Councilmember Jones was present. I don't know if he did a mic check so that we're all there. Can you hear it, Councilmember Jones?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me? Good morning.
All right, you sound good. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, as we participate in this hearing, how important it is to look at a smart, safe restart of our economy, how we as the city partner with our local businesses and residents to understand not only the challenges of this pandemic and what it has done to our communities and businesses, but how we as a city can help these businesses and the residents come back to some type of a normality. We know it never be the same as it was previously, but I think it's important to work together to understand the challenges of each individual operation and business that's out there and how we can partner with them to make sure it's safely and smartly restarting of our economy is done in a way that gets people back to work but understands the safety is utmost importance and that we take all into consideration as we move forward. So I think this hearing is very important. I know it's a challenge, but I know as a city of first class in Philadelphia, we are prepared to move forward, looking forward to working together with our business partners and our community members to getting back to business. And I think this is a challenge, but I think we're up for it and looking forward to a great hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Squilla. Also, this being the first hearing since the tragic news that we learned, and I'm looking at Councilmember Jones, because I know he's been deeply involved in this issue like many others throughout the city, and the loss of life of a seven-year-old, Samar Jones. I know he has been deeply active and engaged with the community, as well as other members of council. And I want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Jones, and also Councilmember Johnson for convening the special committee on gun violence next week on August 11th and 12th at 9:30 to really try to do some more and address this issue of gun violence, which is a crisis in our city. And you may say, well, how does that connect with today's conversation? You know, poverty is also a crisis in our city. And when people don't have the opportunity to earn a living, to do better for their family and others, the issues of gun violence and crime and poverty are intertwined. And we have to do all that we can to address all of these issues. And COVID-19 has also been a crisis. It's a pandemic, but it's also been an economic calamity in our city. And so, although it's a crisis, it's also an opportunity. And I look forward to hearing from our representatives from the executive branch, the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, who have a task force on recharge and recovery, and all the other witnesses talking about what they're trying to do to address this crisis. And I'm going to spotlight one individual who's going to testify today. He is an entrepreneur who has really, from my observation, flourished in this unfortunate situation. I'm thinking about David Sims, who has relocated to the 9th Council Member District, the 9th District on Wadsworth Avenue. I give a little shout out to my colleague, Councilmember Parker. But I remember David when he first started his business, when my wife and I had our ladies' shoe store in Mount Airy, and he was one of the first people that we worked with when we were having these shoe affairs in the store. And seeing how he's been able to grow his business from Ridge Avenue to Wadsworth Avenue, and in spite of COVID-19, he's been able to re-engineer his business and continue to flourish in outstanding ways. And I think that's what gives me some hope about how we can come out of this crisis in a better way, in a way that we provide more economic opportunities, more opportunities for entrepreneurs to flourish like David Sims, and also create the better life for people in our city, so we can celebrate the success of the David Sims and not have to mourn the death of Zamar Jones. So with that, members of council, we will start the hearing. Mr. Iannuzzi, can you introduce the first panel?
Sylvie Gallier-Howard, Acting Director of the Department of Commerce, City of Philadelphia, and Bovaird Nevins, President, Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation.
Ms. Gallier-Howard, if you could start your testimony.
Sure.
Will, can you tell Turham I said come down here a second, please? Oh, Turham.
If anyone that is here in Microsoft Teams, please put your microphone on mute until you're called to testify. Thank you. Ms. Gallier-Howard, you are on mute, so we don't hear you.
My apologies. All right. Good morning, Chairperson Squilla, Chairperson Green, and members of the Committees on Finance and Commerce and Economic Development. My name is Sylvie Gallier-Howard, and I am the Acting Director of Commerce. Thank you for having me here today to provide testimony on Resolution Number 200336 regarding Philadelphia's safe, equitable, and robust economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic is a public health crisis which has precipitated an economic crisis that is unlike anything we've seen in our lifetimes. Experts say we are on track for the worst GDP year in history. 1 in 5 Americans are collecting unemployment right now, and small business owners and workers in vulnerable industries have borne the brunt of this crisis. And as we all know, this crisis has also had a devastating impact on the city's ability to serve its residents, creating an unprecedented $749 million hole in the city's FY21 operating budget. The response from the federal government to support small business owners and workers will be critical to every city's recovery. But here in Philadelphia, we must take additional measures to ensure that we emerge with an economy that is more resilient, more inclusive, and more equitable than ever before. If we focus our collective energy and effort into capitalizing on our city's natural assets and strengths, this crisis presents us with an opportunity to reimagine Philadelphia's economic future and ensure long-term prosperity for all. The Commerce Department and our partner economic development agencies, PIDC and Philadelphia Works, have been approaching our economic recovery work within a 4.4-phase framework as we work to inspire our communities and stakeholders to truly reimagine Philadelphia's future economy. We call this framework the 4 R's: respond, restart, recharge, and reimagine. Examples of our response work include deploying $13.3 million to shore up local small neighborhood businesses and retain jobs through the COVID-19 Small Business Relief Fund. To give you a sense of the types of businesses we were able to support, 66% were minority-owned, and 83% had less than $500,000 in annual revenue. To restart our economy, the Commerce Department is working closely with public health leaders to get updated and accurate information and guidance out to businesses and to support them to reopen with care when it is safe to do so. And we are working with City Council to distribute personal protective equipment, PPE starter kits, to give small businesses some supplies that they'll need to reopen safely. To recharge local businesses with new opportunities, we are working with a larger group of stakeholders, which includes community development finance institutions, business chambers and associations, and leaders throughout the community. Examples of our partnerships around recovery planning and actions include the Chamber's Regional Recharge and Recovery Task Force, the Equitable Entrepreneurship Assessment and Strategy led by the United Way of Southeastern PA and Southern New Jersey, and the Workforce Respond and Recharge Plan with Philadelphia Works. It is incumbent upon all of us to reimagine our economic future in bold new ways to ensure that Philadelphia is positioned for long-term growth, and that this growth is shared equitably by our residents. While we work at the local level to deliver important supports to small businesses, we're also working to connect these businesses to supports at the state and federal level. Recently, Governor Wolf announced a $225 million statewide grant program, and we are working hand in hand with local CDFIs to help businesses learn about this program and apply. We're also working to get information on the streets about federal programs such as the Payroll Protection Program, the Main Street Lending Program, and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. While support for small businesses is important, the other critical piece is support for our most vulnerable workers. Once again, we know we need wide-scale actions from the federal level to ensure that people can meet their basic needs and support their families during this crisis. But we also must take action locally to ensure that we invest in our residents and rebuild our workforce to be stronger and more resilient than ever before. Since the onset of this crisis, more than 197,000 Philadelphians have filed initial unemployment claims. 69% of these claims were filed by people without a high school or equivalent diploma. And there has been a continuous 30% point disparity between black and white claimants. In addition to launching the Career Connected Learning Initiative in partnership with the school district and local employers, as well as continuing to improve the Fair Chance Hiring Initiative for returning citizens, we're launching a $1 million call for ideas to scale up successful programs and to identify new and innovative ways to connect opportunity seekers to meaningful work experiences. Like so many other places around the world, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a devastating economic impact on Philadelphia. We've seen some businesses close, our once vibrant commercial corridors are struggling, and we've seen too many families, especially black and brown families, lose their employment and livelihoods. Yet we all know that Philadelphia and Philadelphians are resilient by nature. Working together, Philadelphia can emerge into a post-COVID-19 world with a more inclusive, robust economy that will help ensure long-term prosperity for all. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have for me. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Let's have Mr. Iannuzzi, wasn't there another speaker along with Ms. Gay Howard for this first panel before we get into council members' questions?
Ann Nevins is also supposed to be on this panel.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairperson Green and Chairperson Squilla, as well as to all the members of City Council in attendance today. My name is Ann Bovaird Nevins, and I thank you very much for inviting me to testify on behalf of PIDC. I know that we are limited in time this morning, so I'll provide a summarized version of my written testimony and also be happy to answer any questions. Over the past 2 months, millions of people have raised a massive collective response to the ongoing issues of unequal justice and racism in our society. PIDC stands in solidarity against racism, bigotry, and violence in any form, and we are committed to doing all that is in our power to drive an equitable economic recovery in Philadelphia for all people, businesses, and communities. In this context, PIDC's COVID-19 recovery strategies strive to put our community's health and safety at the forefront, ensure that we understand the needs and act quickly to address market gaps, and prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion. As my colleague Sylvie Gallier-Howard noted in her testimony, we have been working in close partnership with the City of Philadelphia Department of Commerce and Philadelphia Works to focus on 4 phases of work to drive an equitable economic recovery in Philadelphia. Those 4 phases are respond, restart, recharge, and reimagine. And my written testimony includes how we are defining those terms. PIDC's Restart Action Plan is focused on how we are adapting our 3 existing core strategies to meet Philadelphia's needs at this critical time. Those 3 core strategies are, number 1, support growth and resilience of businesses. PIDC finances growing businesses of all sizes across all industry sectors and delivers business support services to increase the capacity and resilience of diverse entrepreneurs throughout Philadelphia. As noted by Mr. Sims of Eatable Delights prior to the start of the testimony, these are the types of resources that can help generate wealth, build equity and ownership, create and sustain jobs, and stabilize neighborhoods. Number 2, we invest in high-impact community revitalization. PIDC invests in real estate projects that create good jobs, provide essential goods and services, and stimulate additional investment in our neighborhoods. These projects increase economic activity, improve the quality of life, and strengthen communities throughout Philadelphia. And number 3, we catalyze opportunities for inclusive growth. PIDC repositions underutilized land and buildings into productive uses and capitalizes on new market opportunities that will foster a growing, diversified, and inclusive economy in Philadelphia. These investments attract and retain businesses and talent, create opportunities for innovation, leverage public assets, and encourage future investment. In an effort to continue to increase transparency and accountability, particularly in light of the pandemic and the major economic disruption that we're experiencing.
Hold on 1 second. Someone please put your computer on audio on mute so we can hear Ms. Evans' testimony. Thank you. Ms. Evans, sorry for the interruption. Please continue.
Thank you, sir. Our Restart Action Plan is published online at the address provided in my written testimony, and we also plan to report out on the specific action steps taken against this plan via our PIDC monthly newsletter, social media channels, and our blog. 3 specific examples of the action items in our Restart Plan include, number 1, PIDC's participation in the Pennsylvania CDFI network and the statewide grant program for small businesses, and for which it will be announced today that the second and final round of applications will be opening up on August 10th. Number 2 is the launch of our own $3 million Restart Philadelphia Loan Fund, where we are specifically prioritizing businesses located in communities that have high poverty rates and have committed that at least 50% of the funds will go to historically disadvantaged businesses, meaning those businesses that are 51% or more owned by Black, Hispanic, Asian or Asian American, Native American, or Pacific Islander individuals. And third, the announcement of the partnership last week between Ensemble Real Estate Investments and the minority business enterprise Mosaic Development Partners to move forward with next phases of development at the Navy Yard with a strong focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion across all aspects, including the ownership, construction, professional services, operations, tenancy, and workforce. To that end, we have already committed to launching a new workforce development initiative in partnership with the West Philadelphia Skills Initiative that will expand employment opportunities at the Navy Yard to and underemployed residents of South Philadelphia. This Restart Action Plan is intended to be a flexible roadmap that can adapt in real time to changing needs or new understanding of the needs in our community. We welcome new ideas and opportunities for partnership with members of City Council, and I would be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony this morning. I see we have a couple of members that would like to ask questions, and they'll go in this order. Councilmember Jones, Majority Leader Parker, Councilmember Maria Kiana Sanchez, and Councilmember Jamie Gautier. I just have a quick question before my colleagues ask their question. Both of you are somewhat new in your position, although you're not new to your organizations. And with all of the unrest that has occurred due to the tragic killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, which has only exposed the issues that have been historically in our nation, and I would say in our city, based on systemic racism. What new ideas or policies are you envisioning as new members in these leadership roles, especially dealing with a pandemic that we've never seen before? I ask the question because, from my perspective, we have not provided the resources historically in commerce, especially in how we grow jobs in our city. And considering that you are both somewhat new in your position, you have new ideas, new thoughts, new perspectives, but you've also worked in both of those organizations, so you understand some of the challenges both commerce and PIDC had. So I know you both use the respond restart the perspective during COVID-19. I wanted to get some perspectives on things that are based on the things I just did.
Sure. I guess, Ann, I'll go first if that's okay. So I mean, yeah, this is definitely a completely unprecedented moment in time, and I think one of the things in sort of doing our own reckoning in terms of what Commerce has been doing and what we can do better, we have looked at the way we've normally done business attraction and retention, which has often been more about competing with other cities and providing, some type of incentive, and sometimes that has to be the case. But instead of looking at in terms of sort of these transactional ways, we're starting to look at it more as building a foundation that will create long-term prosperity and attractiveness for companies. So, for example, we're looking at using some of the dollars that would have been for maybe a forgivable loan or an incentive to invest in, we have a goal of making Philadelphia the most diverse tech city. And so we're looking at how do we actually invest in that, and how do we build direct pipelines, both through retaining Black and brown students that come here to study in colleges and universities, supporting our incumbent talent pipeline, our future talent pipeline in the schools, looking at how we support Black and brown or underrepresented startups with grants and through an accelerator that's targeting those communities. So we're looking at those types of things so that when a company comes and they say, why should I come to Philadelphia? What can you do for me? We say, we're investing in the community where your employees are going to live, where their kids are going to go to school, and we're investing in your future talent pipeline. So that's one of the ways we're looking at things a little bit differently. The other piece is with the workforce division now consolidated under the Commerce Department. Jobs are directly linked to employers, and Commerce works with employers every single day. So we're making a lot more connectivity. When one of our members of our team is working with a business and they say, we're growing or we want to come and bring this many jobs, we immediately connect to the workforce division and look at how we can make sure that those jobs are linked to opportunities through some of our partners that do workforce development. And before that linkage wasn't so direct. I'll stop there, and I'm sure Ann has some great ideas to share as well.
Thanks, Sylvie, and thanks, Councilman, for the question. It is definitely something that we have been thinking a lot about at PIDC. And I think you said something, Councilman, earlier in terms of how do we, I don't know if we want to say the word opportunity in terms of things coming out of the pandemic and the terrible situation that so many Philadelphians find themselves facing. But I do think that if there is an opportunity, it's for us to relook at what we do and how we do it. And we had a session with all of our staff last month as part of a monthly town hall that we do, where we watched a documentary film called A Dream Deferred that actually features a couple of members of this council, and talked about the impact of redlining and some of the historic decisions about how development happens in Philadelphia, and what do we need to be doing and thinking about differently moving forward. One of my colleagues, I think, put it really well when she said, I've been thinking a lot about the ways in which we've been able to sort of toss out the rule book, so to speak, in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Why haven't we been able to do that in the same way in light of the pandemic of systemic racism? And I thought that was a really good way to frame it, and I think that that's driving a lot of how we are looking at what we can and should be doing going forward. So one of the specific things that we are doing, I think, differently now is not just sort of letting the chips fall where they may with respect to our lending activities or our development activities, and then trying to track and report out after the fact. I think that's important. You need to track the outcomes, and you need to track, and we're going to need to continue to track what we're actually doing when it comes to lending to minority-owned businesses or investing in low-income communities. However, now I think we are being much more intentional about putting that at the front end. So as I mentioned in my testimony with our Restart Philadelphia Loan Fund, we have said from the outset that not only are we prioritizing making loans to businesses that are located in high poverty communities, but that within that we are specifically committing that at least 50% of the funds, and I think it will be significantly higher, but we have said that it will be at least 50% of those funds in that loan program will go to historically disadvantaged businesses with the definition that I gave before. And that, at least to my knowledge of being at PIDC, is not something that we have ever explicitly done in the past. So I'll stop there, but happy to answer any questions.
And one other thing for my colleagues in council, there's one other witness to have a scheduled testify in this panel, Ann Padulin. So we're going to allow her to testify, and then we'll get into the questions. Ms. Padulin, if you can provide your testimony.
Sure. Excuse me. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Chairperson Squilla, Chairperson Green, and members of the Committees on Finance and Commerce and Economic Development. My name is Ann Fadulin, and I am the Director of Planning and Development for the City of Philadelphia. I am pleased to be here today to present testimony on Resolution Number 200336 and on our efforts to promote a safe, equitable, and robust economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. As you know, the Department of Planning and Development has a broad mandate to plan, prepare, and develop successful neighborhoods for all Philadelphians. We provide support to developers looking to navigate the development process. We review plans developed by businesses and residents. We help residents address their housing needs, and we support neighborhood improvement initiatives. All those tasks have become more challenging because of COVID-19. Beginning in March, our boards and commissions could no longer meet in person. Staff could not meet with applicants to review plans. Contractors could not go into homes to make repairs. We could no longer meet with clients needing housing support. I am pleased to report that most planning and development functions are back up and running. Those that are not yet operational will be so soon. When the closures first began, our Development Services Unit was a critical link as developers attempted to navigate the partially open government. It provided information to the development community on what was working and what wasn't, and delivered feedback from that community to relevant city agencies. Development services help keep affordable housing, commercial, and market-rate residential developments moving forward, and even helped the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania get approval for its temporary COVID beds. The boards and commissions that review projects are all meeting remotely. If you have a project that must go before the Zoning Board of Adjustment, City Planning Commission, Civic Design Review, the Historical Commission, or the Art Commission, your project will get a hearing. We are also meeting more frequently so the applicants waiting for our decisions won't have to wait as long. ZBA is holding 8 to 10 meetings a month instead of the usual 4, and CDR is holding 2 meetings a month instead of 1. We know developers and their construction workers are anxious to get to work, and we are working hard to help them. Community members are critical to these processes. We have set up an RCO help desk where staff will answer both technical and process questions RCOs may have about hosting virtual meetings. Staff at the Art, Historical, and Planning Commissions are reviewing applicant plans remotely, and we are developing protocols that will enable us to review paper plans safely. Staff is responding to applicant inquiries. If you email us a question or send us a plan, you will get an answer. The economic effects of COVID-19 have placed unprecedented pressure on homeowners and renters, and we are supporting them. We have offered 2 phases of rental assistance that will benefit both tenants and landlords. To date, we have made more than $2.3 million in rent payments. We expect to help more than 10,000 tenants remain in their homes. I want to thank the housing counseling agencies, the NACs, legal assistance organizations, and our city partners at 311 who helped to ensure that residents could apply for assistance regardless of their access to technology. For homeowners, the Save Your Home Philly hotline continues to operate, connecting homeowners facing foreclosure to resources to prevent it. The Restore, Repair, Renew program remained open so that homeowners could get low-interest home improvement loans and contractors could get home improvement work. We continue to process Philly First Home applications so that low and moderate income first-time homebuyers can purchase their first home. When construction was shut down, PHDC provided documentation so that work on more than 1,200 affordable homes in nearly 30 projects could continue. PHDC has issued RFPs to create new affordable housing on vacant land in Kensington, and staff continues to move projects totaling more than 2,100 affordable homes through the development pipeline. PHDC has reworked its hotline and client intake systems so that its home improvement programs can serve clients. Contractors began making home repairs some time ago, and we expect to resume taking BSRP and adaptive modifications applications next week. We continue to support neighborhood improvement. When it met remotely last month, the Redevelopment Authority Board approved a construction contract to improve a playground and selected redevelopers for affordable housing and a community garden. It has been a challenge to transition to a completely new way of operating. But I am pleased that we are supporting programs and projects that improve neighborhoods, create jobs, and serve and protect the most vulnerable of our residents. I want to publicly thank the staff at the Department of Planning and Development and the Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation for their work to help Philadelphians and its residents persevere through this pandemic. I am happy to answer any questions you may have for me at this time. Thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Doolin, for your testimony. In this order, we'll have Councilmember Jones, Majority Leader Parker, and Councilmember Maria Quiñones Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and particularly thank you for your comments about the tragedy on North Simpson Street and the senseless loss of life. Other members have texted me in that regard, and those comments are heartfelt by me and members of my community. And having the foresight to see how this hearing is connected to that tragedy is visionary. Thank you. I guess I'm glad and also thankful to the Chamber of Commerce, Commerce Department, PIDC, for not being my grandfather's Chamber of Commerce, PIDC. These kinds of conversations we're having today, as much as I love retired Walter Lesio, who first hired me, that wasn't the top of the agenda back then, and I can see how we've evolved. So I'm thankful for that. Saturday, you were out at the convention center putting together these packages for over 100 commercial parks in the city of Philadelphia. I am truly thankful for that. So with my questions come this. First, there are over 100 commercial corridors in the city of Philadelphia. Restaurants, barbershops, beauty salons have been the most hard-hit sectors of small business. How are we doing on the media, township of media style street closures, which will allow open air dining, not in weather like today, but in non-inclement weather? Where are we on those kinds of street closures going forward?
So, Councilman, thank you for the question. We have been working on that for months, and I think that it's been really a true partnership between streets and L&I, health, commerce, and I think it's going pretty well, honestly. So, we have there's sort of three formats in terms of utilization of the sidewalks or the streets. And I know that there have been, I don't have the numbers offhand, but I can get them to you, but at least a couple hundred applications for new permits for use of the streets. And there's even been some safe closures of streets. We're now looking at the fall and the possibility of heat lamps and that type of thing. So this has just been, honestly, I have colleagues, and they invited me to this every day 8:30 a.m. meeting, so I get all the chats and the teams, even though I'm not actually in those meetings, and I see they're working diligently on all of the issues. They're tracking any enforcement issues, but I'd say overall it's going pretty smoothly.
So I'm appreciative of that, but the specifics of how one applies, what is the criteria, I'd like you to provide to the chair, who could then give to members, so that when we're asked by those respective Wadsworth Avenues and Passyunk Avenues and others, how do I get in line for this, we can answer them clearly.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that, sure. I don't believe there's not a line, but there's definitely an application process, so I will definitely get you that information. I'd be happy to.
So specifically, barbershops, beauty salons, and daycares have begun organizing because of the impacts of the pandemic. How are you specifically working with those small businesses that occupy our commercial corridors and disproportionately are in impacted neighborhoods and are Black and brown business owners?
So through a number of ways. We have regular phone calls with the BIDs and the CDCs, who that we support through the corridor managers, as well as other types of support. So through those partners, we are reaching out to those businesses as well, and getting information about what the needs there, and getting information about our programs out to those businesses. We also are working through our Office of Business Services that I have had people that have been in the office on the floor since the very beginning, answering calls, supporting those businesses. We have had conversations about the businesses that couldn't open until the green, and of course we're not in a full green mode yet, being the hardest impacted, because even the personal services that you speak of, nail salons, barbershops, and also restaurants, they can't open fully even when they're open, and so we know it's very hard for them to stay alive. So we are looking at potentially, if the resources permit, a grant program for those businesses. But we're looking at other things like how we support them with the PPE, potentially with fit outs, that type of thing.
So the sooner we know those regulations, the better small businesses can make the business decision to make capital improvements that comply with our regulations. So if I know I need plexiglass and I need distancing, I can make those conscious decisions. The earlier the better, with the clock not working in their favor because the rent or the mortgage is still due. So that's incredible. That's important. Finally, I read an article yesterday about, even with the pandemic, there are certain streets and corridors in Philadelphia that are hot like fish grease. They are on fire, in development, more permits. I think the Director of Planning talked about opening back up and zoning opportunities. And that is good news in some respects, but it is bad news impact-wise for others. Is there a corresponding traffic study being done that not only deals with the actual box of Center City, but tributaries like Ridge Avenue in my district, Main Street in my district, Germantown Avenue in both the 9th and the 8th, that are saying, how do we get more people quicker to places without having the traffic and parking impact? The planning folk might be the appropriate responders. Hearing none.
I'm here. No, I'm here. Give me a second to click. My reflexes aren't what they used to be. So I think those are all the concerns that folks are talking about. And I don't think we have anybody from the Office of transportation and infrastructure and sustainability on the call, but I think those are things that are being looked at. I do think one of the things that we are doing, particularly in the planning department and planning commission, is we're really getting ready to take a look at how we approach our next comprehensive plan, right? We have the Philly 2035 plan, but we're 10 years into that now, and so we're starting to really think about what the next plan looks like, both long-term, but also some of the immediate things. And I think part of that is what does the city look like coming out of this? This has been obviously a tragedy of unprecedented proportions on so many fronts. And I think there's some kind of standard planning principles that would in the past have been applied to not a situation like this, because we haven't been through it, but just sort of things that we would have done immediately, like, well, this allows us to cut down traffic, or we could close streets because cars aren't running, or add in bike lanes. But I think, we are realizing that some of that sort of traditional planning practice is not based in equity.
So
and so rather than sort of quickly saying, let's just go to kind of planning 101, we are taking a little bit of time and thinking through that and trying to address exactly some of the things that you raised, Councilman Jones, which is when you're shutting down a street to allow businesses to reopen, that's advantageous to some, but disadvantageous to others, right? Because others are dependent on buses. They don't have another means to get to where they need to get to go to work. Or we've seen, even before the pandemic, how difficult it was with someone who may have a little bit more difficulty getting around from a physical aspect than others when, sidewalks are covered with tables and things like that. So I think how we look at that equitably, unfortunately, doesn't mean we have a quick answer, but we want to make sure that we have the best answer that works as best as possible for all. And I think that's the conversation that's happening right now.
So that's the micro. I want the macro, which is I have in my district, and I want to applaud PIDC's work on both the Navy Yard and Commerce, on the Navy Yard and the old refinery. That process is big picture thinking, and I want more of that. But we are bidding out and evaluating opportunities and selecting developers. You only get to choose one, but there was number 2, and there was number 3 that didn't get. In my district, not in South Philly, Vice Chair Squilla, but in the 4th district, there is 31 acres on the paper mill. It is also a waterfront property that I want the number 2 person or applicant, number 3 applicant to take a ride up there. Because when we start talking about recovery, the micro is important and how to do street closures and restaurants and barbershops, beauty salons. But when you start talking about thousands of job opportunities, the next mayor, whoever that should be, he or she, has to have your imprint on that idea so that they can implement it now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Green, you're muted.
Eric, you're muted.
respond, restart, recharge, and reimagine, but ensure that it's being done in a way that includes everybody. And listen, Councilman, Chairman Green, when I hear people use that term, inclusiveness, inclusive growth, I don't want inclusive anything that's not done equitably, right? It includes, but if you get 90 and I only get access to 10, that's not inclusive enough for me. With that being said, let me also just start by saying to Sylvie, to Ann, and Ann, one special thanks to each of you for the work that you've done during this time. Sylvie, Councilman Green noted that both you and Ann are fairly new in your roles, but the manner and the swiftness with which your team was able to put together a response relative to the 13.3 million that first went out to help our small businesses, along with what we just did Saturday. Councilman Jones and Councilmember Gaultier and I had the opportunity to join with Council President in that distribution of PPE to ensure that those kits will get distributed to neighborhoods across the city, right? So no one feels that I am less or my region is less important than those areas that you talked about, Councilman Jones, that Navy Yard, that Sunoco, but small businesses and neighborhoods are able to benefit. It's with that being said, Sylvie, that you in particular, because as we get through this health pandemic, right, via COVID, and we think about civil unrest and we think about Black Lives Matter, I've been talking to a lot of people in my community who are saying, Sherelle, it's been nice to hear partners put up their fists and march and talk about making, adjustments and addressing police brutality and restorative justice. Those things are critically important, but we want to see how much Black Lives Matter when we talk about access to opportunity, economic opportunity. So, Sylvie, when you talk about those fit-outs that need to be done in neighborhoods where these small businesses really don't have access to dollars. They have to reconstruct not just their storefronts, but even inside. They have to develop lines outside now, just a new innovative and creative manner to try to provide their service. And so tell me, if you will, are you thinking about now, and you don't have to go into too many details, how can we work with the Commerce Department, similar to the partnership that we did working with our tech staff? Kudos to Council President Clark John Christmas for working with Commerce under the guise of our new normal budget request that Council made in our action. But are we thinking about that? Because when people start thinking about Black Lives Mattering, if they look and see work being done in their neighborhoods, but the people who are benefiting from the opportunity to do the work are not a part of that reconstruction, there's going to be a problem. Because now I can't believe what you say about Black Lives Mattering because I see what you do. What you're thinking about that, Sylvie, that you can talk to us about, does Commerce have a focus on that right now as you're thinking about the supports that these small businesses need?
Absolutely, yeah. So, when we did the grant program, the Restore and Reopen program for the businesses that were impacted, we tried, just like the other grant program, we tried to get it up and launched very, very quickly so we could get the dollars to these businesses because that period overlapped with the reopening, going into the green, and so a lot of those businesses were ready to reopen, and then they were damaged and they couldn't, and so. What we did as an initial starting point was provide a list of businesses from the OEO registry and from PHDC, the businesses that work in the Basic Systems Repair program. So there are a lot of minority and small local businesses. But we know that we have a great model in the Taking Care of Business program where we're going to be putting out $7 million this year on cleaning commercial quarters, and I call it a win-win-win because It's cleaning the corridors and improving the environment for the corridors, which helps businesses that are on those corridors. It's providing jobs to people in the community, and it's also, in some cases, supporting local minority-owned businesses that provide those types of services. So we're looking at how can we go beyond, because, you know, the dollars that we put out, just like the last time, it's a pebble in the ocean. They were larger size grants than, they were about $10,000 grants. So for some businesses, that gets them some of the way there, but some of them had no insurance. Some of them had tens of thousands of dollars of damage, and so they're going to need more help. So we're looking at, I'm not going to go into a tremendous amount of detail, but we're looking at how we can do something like the Taking Care of Business program, where we can get local folks opportunities to jobs as that construction, as those rehabs happen.
Well, Sylvie, listen, I want to say a special thank you. I look forward to working with you. I know Council President Clark has been laser focused on creating access to opportunity immediately, right? So we're talking about projects. We usually say we want to support what's shovel ready. We want opportunities that give people access and remove barriers to entry immediately. Finally, I want to say this. The intergovernmental cooperation and planning that Council engaged in with our local, state, and federal partners together in the midst of this all, I think that too has been unprecedented. And so we can't not acknowledge the work that State Senator, our Appropriations Chair, Vincent Hughes, when we talk about that $225 million statewide grant program that's, you know, specifically geared to those barbershops and salons that Councilman Jones talked about, that doesn't happen without an intentional on-the-ground advocacy from our Senate and our House delegation. In addition to that, let me say this, and I'm going to close with this. Commerce and planning are essential to ensuring that neighborhoods across the city get access to the opportunity to thrive. As we reimagine and restart, Councilman Jones, how we're working on development. And every neighborhood needs to see that it is valued enough. So that means as we wait anxiously for the response from the federal government, and Council's waiting anxiously, right? Because we closed that $740 million hole. But at the same time, we can't expect departments like Commerce to do what we need to do when we haven't shored you up to have the appropriate staff. So I want to put that in Councilman Green. I want to say to you, because I know this is something that you've also been very interested in, we need to pay attention to this, because we can't expect a department to do the work when we have not been able to, make some new hard adds to dollars to get the staff that we need to do the work on the ground. So I'll be watching that very, very carefully. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you. Our next Councilmember speaker is Councilmember Maria Quinones Sanchez, followed by Councilmember Jamie Gautier and Councilmember Alan Dunham.
Thank you. Let me just echo some of the sentiments of my colleagues around the type of work and the recommitment that we all have in being more focused and intentional about the building a more equitable Philadelphia. And for that, it's really important that we acknowledge some of the institutional challenges that have been there, and that we're going to call ourselves on it and really check ourselves on it. That said, last week I released a call to action to businesses where I outlined some very specific steps. And to the three of you who are in a position to make decisions around investing in businesses or in some of the work that's being done, how many of those businesses would qualify or would be successful in the pledge and the call out that I did, from board of directors to officers to how they purchase and their commitment to providing family sustaining jobs? How are those values being reflected in your decision making? Because you're saying 50% of the money will go to historically marginalized business, but how are we holding the mainstream businesses that benefit from all our tax incentives, all of our infrastructure to a standard? how many of the businesses that we work with could take that pledge? And are you as an organization willing to take that pledge and said, we're going to hold the majority businesses accountable to some values and to some of the focus that we're all pledging today? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember, for that question. I think we absolutely are, I will read the details and make sure that I fully understand the pledge, but I think based on the question, I believe the answer is certainly, yes, for our organization in terms of holding ourselves accountable and looking at our own board and staff as we focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just internally but externally as well. And I think with respect to the question about the funding, I do anticipate that the vast majority of the loans that will be made through this Restart Philadelphia Loan Fund are going to small businesses that may not have, that may not have boards of directors, but we're certainly very happy to, to look at that with them as well. In terms of we received about 300 inquiries for the Restart Philadelphia Loan Fund during the 2-week period that we had the inquiry phase open. We're now working through a first pool of applications for a round 1, and that again is based on the stated priorities for businesses that are located in high poverty areas, and then businesses that are historically disadvantaged. So we've invited about 50 of the businesses that submitted an inquiry to move forward with a full application. And of those businesses that we had invited to apply in round 1, 55% of the businesses are Black-owned, 15% are Hispanic-owned, and 15% are Asian or Asian American-owned. And we will continue to prioritize both the business location in a high poverty community as well as the focus on historically disadvantaged businesses with those funds.
And I would add to that, Councilwoman, that when we're engaging, we've done some of this through different mechanisms. Certainly, we were working on a quality jobs grant program before the pandemic hit, which was going to really focus on incentivizing companies to provide quality type jobs. We have also through workforce, we identified a number of employers that basically were able to, they took sort of a quiz of sorts and were able to attest to the fact that they meet a certain standard in terms of workforce opportunities and their practices when it comes to workforce. But I would say, I certainly feel that, there's, I think that when you talk about a pledge, that's the first step to action, right? And action speaks louder than words. And so in working, and I'm sure you'll hear from the Chamber and working with the Chamber on the recharge and recovery process, a pledge came up a lot in different conversations. And I sat on a lot of the different calls of the different committees, and I heard a lot of businesses speaking to a real commitment or a desire to make a better commitment. And I would say that we have to, as government, when we're working with companies, when we're attracting companies, when we're helping companies grow, and especially our larger companies, we have to elevate the issue, and we will elevate the issue. We do pledge to do that. When we see that there is a lack of diversity, either at the CEO level, at the staff level, at the board level, we will elevate that, and we have done that. And we have said, tell us about your diversity. And when we see it's poor, we say, you've got to do better than this. We can't invest in you if you're not. If this is what the faces look like. It's clear you're not trying hard enough. So we've had those conversations. I think that what we'll see, because I think there will be pledges out there, is that some companies will be at the beginning of that life cycle, and they will need to learn, how do I actually do supplier diversity? How do I even measure my participation rate? And there will be other companies that already have a person and they're sophisticated and they'll have a goal to double it or increase it. And I think we'll be there to support in all ways. And I know that IOLA, we've had this conversation, IOLA from OEO is ready to be out there, not just in government in terms of participation, but out in the private sector supporting.
Yeah,
So,
and let me just say from our standpoint, I'm sorry, really quickly, is that we are really looking at how do we expand the capacity of our minority contractors that are already participate through our basic system repair program. Also how we sort of have them cooperatively work together with some of our small minority developers that we're seeing come through some of our land bank and redevelopment authority developments, and we're hosting roundtables amongst the developers and the contractors to have that conversation and to inform us about what products they would need from us in order to be able to grow their capacity. And then we've also been talking closely with the BIA, who's actually going through the OEO list to ensure that the contractors that are on there are what they say they are, and then to promote those contractors amongst their developers as well. And then I would just say one of the things we're looking at across the board is how do we ensure that any of our programs, policies, whatever it is that we're offering, we put out social impact, I want to say about 3 or 4 years ago, as a piece of everything we're doing, and we're looking at trying to shift that to ensuring that whatever we are involved in is actually returning wealth to communities. And we're talking through that, trying to figure out what that means. We'll be doing outreach around that. But I think we want to shift. It's not just are you doing social impact, but how are you actually returning wealth back into the communities that you're doing work in or proposing a project for.
thank you. And again, the pledges to me is real simple. And to Sylvie's point, words make you feel good. Actions say a lot more about where your values are. When you see a Pepsi nationally say, I'm going to put $500 million and we're going to do a self-reflection, or you see a Netflix saying, our numbers are shitty and we're going to have to own it. But making pledges that we should not be investing, lending, supporting mainstream businesses who don't make pledges to help us grow some of those businesses, where they buy, how they shop, whether it's locally. Even as we look at this restaurant industry, quaint restaurants downtown are maybe a thing of the past, but we should be aggressively pursuing those businesses to move to neighborhoods and other places. And that's not going to happen by itself. And I'm really concerned that, once this wave is over, people do not commit or will not do the things that we all know need to be done. And I expect government we need to hold ourselves accountable, but we absolutely need to do it. And as we reimagining means redistributing, recognizing the historical shifts and disparities that have existed. So I look forward to the conversation. Again, I think that people need to pledge. People just need to say, I don't want any business in my district to come to me and ask me for any incentive until they tell me where they fall in those categories, because I think that's where we have to go. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to everyone.
Okay, Councilmember Gauthier, Councilmember Dom, and Councilmember Bass.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My first question is for Commerce and PIDC. I've been touring the commercial corridors in my district, and I also just held a virtual town hall on small business recovery resources last week. PIDC and Commerce were two of the local agencies who first came out with assistance programs when the pandemic started. I'm interested in knowing what you've learned through these few months in terms of what our small businesses need most in terms of recovery, and how will Commerce and PIDC work to meet those needs?
Dan, do you want to start since you've been doing the more recent program as well?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you, Council Member, for the question. It is definitely one that we have been very focused on, and taking what are the things that we learned from starting very early on with the initial Small Business Relief Fund in partnership with the Commerce Department, and how can we take what worked well and also what we learned that didn't work well or that didn't have the outcomes that we wanted, to kind of shift that and change that for next phases of what we do. So I would say that some some of the key learnings that we've now been able to help apply as part of the Pennsylvania CDFI network that is working for the distribution of that $200 million from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as well as in our Restart Philadelphia Loan Fund, was again kind of almost flipping the process, where I think in the at the beginning of the Small Business Relief Fund, we set out, quite a number of criteria that we wanted to focus on. It was a lot of a focus on the businesses in industries that were the hardest hit, as well as, businesses maybe that employed, that employed a good number of people, with the aim of trying to keep as many people connected to their jobs. And so I think some of the things that we have learned, and now applied coming out of that in the next phases, is to the need to be really intentional and have a specific commitment about reaching Black and Brown-owned businesses in particular. So I think, again, you see it in both the state program as well as in PIDC's Restart loan program, where there's a specific minimum commitment in terms of the dollars that are going to go to historically disadvantaged businesses. And then I would say also location-wise, that is also something that I think we have focused on, at least from the PIDC side, much more so in the outset of the Restart Philadelphia Loan Program, and focusing specifically on businesses located in high poverty communities. And that is sort of combined with less of an emphasis on jobs. If we know already from looking at the data about Philadelphia's business community that our Black and Brown owned businesses are less likely either to be employer businesses or to have larger numbers of employees, if we're prioritizing the businesses where the job creation or the job retention impact is the highest, that's going to automatically kind of skew in a different way than I think we would be intending in terms of focusing on Black and Brown owned businesses, or specifically historically disadvantaged owned businesses. So I think those are some of the lessons that we've learned and kind of how we tried to apply those. And we will keep learning. We won't get it exactly right this time either, but I think that we are committed to recognizing what are things that we've done that have not worked like we've intended, and fixing those as best as we can for next rounds of relief efforts.
Thank you. Should I add anything? I know you have more questions. I'll go through just a couple additional things that I think we've learned. Well, certainly the first program that PIDC and Commerce partnered on was very administratively burdensome. It was very challenging. So we've learned a lot and come a long way. I think even with our Restore and Reopen, we got to a much more streamlined place. But I think some of the things we definitely have seen is access to information is just continuously a challenge. And we try to work with all of our partners, CDFIs, CDCs, community organizations, to make sure that businesses are aware that the opportunity exists. And then also the process. We've gotten better at even simplifying the application more than even the first time around. Tax compliance continues to be a challenge. And I think also we learned that certain communities definitely have better access than others. We even though the first program with PIDC, we made the application available in Spanish, in Chinese, and in English, we did not get very many applications in Spanish. And we had a really hard time getting Latinx business applicants to apply. So that's something that we're looking at more deeply to see what obstacles exist there and how do we really meet those needs. But I think what Ann spoke to in terms of criteria, focusing on high poverty areas, low income census tracts is, it gets you a lot of the way there.
And if I might add just one more thing, Council.
Sure.
One lesson that we're learning now from the first round of the statewide grant program is that one of the key barriers when Sylvie talked about access is physical access to a computer and the interpersonal assistance of helping people be able to convert documents to PDFs and upload them. So that is absolutely a barrier that we're trying to figure out now. How can we address that in this second round for the grant program that's going to open up on August 10th? And so if there's any opportunity to partner with the council offices on that, we would love to do so.
Sure, absolutely. We would love to partner on that. As a follow-up, I'm very concerned about speculators using this crisis to accumulate properties on commercial corridors that are home to large amounts of Black and brown businesses. What tools can the Commerce and PIDC deploy to make sure that our commercial corridors are owned by our local business owners and by community-centered organizations?
We actually do have a commercial mortgage product that is attractive financing that can be senior financing and does not require specific numbers of job creation for business owners to be able to purchase property. So that is specifically also targeted to minority, women, and immigrant business owners. And I think we might actually hear from one of our clients later on today, but we are very focused on that as a product in addition to some of the more COVID related working capital needs for businesses. We are open for business on that front as well and want to work with folks both in terms of the capital that they need, but also I think the technical assistance to support people transitioning from being a renter into being an owner. There's a lot of other things that need to be considered, and so I think that combination of the capital but also the technical assistance is really important.
Thank you. Sylvie, do you have anything to add from Commerce's standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I know there's other panels, so we all sourced in that space. We have, we did provide, we had a product that we put out last year that is for basically for CDCs to acquire properties in order to ensure that they can then, resell them to businesses. And also for businesses to acquire property, so really for wealth creation in communities and to avoid displacement.
Thank you. My last question is for Ann Fadul. And you talked earlier about the $2.3 million in rental assistance that has been paid out. I wanted to know, is that $2.3 million related to the first round of rental assistance? And if so, how long will it take to get the remainder of the first round of rental assistance on the street?
Yeah, so that is actually combined with both the first round and the second round. I think we have Greg Heller on if he has something that he can add in advance. We are currently working through applications as quickly as possible. I just see Greg came on, so I'm going to turf it over to him because he's probably got more detailed information than I do.
Sure. Thanks, Ann. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So that $2.3 million is actually just phase one. For phase two, we just got our money from PHFA late last week, so we can finally start processing applications for phase two. We have 1,668 that are ready to be processed, representing just over $6 million. But again, we just got our contract and our funding from PHFA late last week, so we're just starting the phase two processing now. So that $2.3 million is all phase one.
And from a timing perspective, how long will it take to get the remainder of those funds onto the street?
For phase one, our goal is end of September. For phase two, the funding has to be all spent by the end of November, according to the state statute.
Thank you. No more questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll have Councilmember Dom, Councilmember Bass, Councilmember Squilla, and Councilmember Gibbons.
Thank you, Chairman Green and Chairman Squilla, and thank you to everyone who's just testified and my colleagues. I agree with many of the sentiments, and I just have a few quick questions. How many businesses currently have closed? Are we aware of, and how many do you anticipate closing?
I don't think we know the number at this point, to be honest. I just don't think anybody actually has that number. What we've heard is that on commercial corridors, it could be up to a third that could close. I think nationally, I've heard 20% have closed, and of African-American firms or companies, 40% have closed, but I don't think we have the numbers for Philadelphia at this point.
And in that vein, do we have any idea what kind of job losses for the city we might anticipate?
Well, so it looks like I think we've had, I think in my testimony it said 100 and 170,000 unemployment claims, 197,000 unemployment claims. So, of course, not all those will be permanent losses, but we anticipate that a lot of jobs will not be coming back, or will be very slow to come back, or will become automated. So, your guess is as good as mine in terms of that, but it's going to be a high number.
And so, I think from my experience, it's always been harder to start a new business than to keep an existing business alive that was successful before the pandemic. So in that light, is there an overall plan from the administration on how we can revive, smartly restart our economy and specific industries like hospitality and others? And also, how do we grow our economy in this environment equitably across the board for the city? Is there a written plan, the tactics and the strategies that tell us how we can go about doing this?
There is not one written plan. I think that we are all working on that together, and we have a number of sort of shorter documents with initiatives that we have either started or that we plan to do. But we have not, created a big document or anything of that sort. But plans are certainly underway, and some of the strategies that I mentioned in my testimony, like the equitable entrepreneurship plan that we're working on, that will be ready by about the end of the year. And we have a workforce respond recharge planning process that's happening. And that too, there'll be a shorter term response. It won't be a final draft, but there'll be a part of that plan, and then there'll be a longer term strategy. So those are all things that are underway.
Because my experience is we do a lot of projects, but we need to set down that vision and then work from the vision to get the strategies and tactics to complete different projects in every area. We should have a plan now. How is hospitality going to survive? Like, what's going to happen September 1st? How does a restaurant survive? How does a hotel survive? What is the plan for us to get back this economy back on track? Because we need to do this, because everything's connected. And I think the Chairman Green said, violence, economy, it all connects. And this is like really crucial. I will end on a happy note, though. I gave a call to, I think, maybe Sylvia, you were involved with this, Oatly, that's relocating into the Kensington area. I gotta love that company, a new company hiring a bunch of people, coming into Philadelphia at this time, hiring, I don't know how many people, but they're gonna have a huge expansion there. And I asked them, why'd you pick Philadelphia? And they said, close to all the major cities, much less expensive, cheaper, rents and so forth. And so in that light, like, how do we support them? We should be all over them saying, how do we help you grow to every one of the businesses that are coming here and that are here? How do we put those supports in place? And I know Majority Leader Parker had a very good point. We've slashed your budgets. We need to look at that, because the budget of commerce and PIDs and other, we need to support those more now than we did before. You guys need more help now, because you're such an important part of getting over this pandemic and getting this economy back on track. So whatever we can do to do that, I'll be a supporter.
Thank you. I do want to say, when you hear from the chamber that there was those 8 subcommittees we're working at, that was a planning process around those different sectors that hopefully you'll get a chance to hear about.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Councilmember Bass, Squilla, and Gibbs.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I have just a couple of statements and questions. Some of my questions were answered earlier. But just to follow up on Councilmember Dom's statement, I just really can't emphasize enough that there is no overall plan for how we're going to attack or ensure that businesses are coming back to Philadelphia, and particularly for African American businesses, which we know were something like 2 or 3% of the overall economy here in the city of Philadelphia. To not have a plan, what the old saying is, when you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And so if we don't have a plan of action in terms of how this is going to happen, then it's going to be the same old, same old. And I'm, very much concerned about that. I think all of my colleagues were very much concerned. We don't want to go back to what we had. We don't want to go back to the same old, same old. So, I just really want to encourage that, all of these folks, whether it's in Commerce or PIDC or, Ann Fadulin's group, like that, everyone is working together, I know. So let's work together on a plan to move the city forward in a significant way, especially for people who have been traditionally underserved and not included in the allocation of resources. So that's one thing I just wanted to say. The other is that as I, canvass my commercial corridors, I am greatly concerned about the fact that, we've had the riots, we've had all of these things that have happened, the pandemic, which was brutal to the economy by itself. We've had a lot of destruction on our commercial corridors. We have a lot of trash now on our commercial corridors because we know that the streets department has been hit hard by the pandemic, and there are effects on that as well. So I guess what I'm asking is, when can the people of Philadelphia, particularly those who shop along our commercial corridors, when can we expect to see some of the work that has been done through planning, through commerce, through PIDC? I know we've talked about it, and we had a great call with some of my merchants, from my district and throughout the city of Philadelphia. And I thank Ann and Sylvie for being a part of that call. But, the fact remains that a lot of people still feel, upset. When is it happening? When's it going to come? Even just yesterday, one of my constituent services folks was out canvassing and encountered a small business owner who felt abandoned by the city. And this is a district where we have, retail managers, commercial managers that are funded through commerce, but they haven't seen anything. They haven't heard anything. So I just want to express, the sense of urgency I think that we all feel around this issue. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman. If I can just clarify, I would say that between PIDC and Philadelphia Works and the work we've been doing in the chamber, that I think that we really do have a plan. We're working within this framework, and I think that we each have our own 6 to 12 month plans. What we don't have is a document. We don't have a big published, beautiful document, honestly, because we've been focused on the work. And I think that there will be some documents published out there, but right now we do have a plan. I will say that we do definitely have a plan.
I'm sorry not to cut you off, but I think as an elected representative, that having access to that plan is critical, because people, I don't know how many people are asking you, but they're asking me like crazy. I'm constantly hearing from my business owners that they want to know. And because there's a plan, but I don't have access to the plan, it doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think it's fair that a lot of businesses, despite, everything that we've tried to do with the grants, with the PPE kits, our programs that we already had that are ongoing, that the need out there is so tremendously vast and our resources are so limited that I'm not surprised a lot of people do feel abandoned. We're doing everything that we can, but the need is just tremendous.
And council member, if I might also add, one of the, you mentioned in terms of that disconnect of reaching people, one of the things that came up on the discussion with that call that you had organized was the idea of trying to reach people through text messaging instead of relying solely on emails or social media. And so we do have a follow-up meeting this week with the U.S. Digital Response Team to talk about moving forward with a text message-based platform that could perhaps try to help bridge some of that communications gap. So thank you again for that outcome from that call.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for staying on top of that, staying on top of these issues. And I know that listen, I know you're working, we're all working, we're working very, very hard. But you know what it is? People want to see the results. People want to see some action. And so, folks are, have been patient, I believe, but the sooner we can show them what we've been up to, I think the better.
Thank you, Councilmember Bass. Councilmember Squilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know that we're short on time here, so I'm going to be real direct. We heard everybody talk what the concerns are, but I think what we're missing here is that part of our conversation includes the health department. And I know they're not here today, but a lot of the ideas of how we open up and the way we open up goes through the health department who review the openings. And I think part of the concerns from the business owners and even some of the residents is it seems like we're going in one direction, then we stop. We're going in another direction, then we stop. So we need to have to be, I think, clearer on where we're going and how we're getting there and the safe way to do that. These starts and fits, whether it's indoor dining or catering and other businesses that are still haven't been able to generate a way to open up safely, I think is driving the idea of the anxiety that's going on. And what we're missing here is part of not doing things and hurts with mental health. It hurts with your physical health. It hurts with anxiety levels. And all these things add to what we talked about, crime and other things that are associated with this. So we hear all that, but we need to have the health department involved in these conversations with Commerce and PIDC to make sure we understand not only the health ramifications, but a way to find it to do it safely now that we're sort of flattening the curve and keeping that curve flattened. Do it safely so if it does spike up and go, we know that we continue doing it safely and be able to adjust accordingly. And that's what I don't see. And so I think we need to include health more in these conversations to be able to say, all right, understand your concerns, but how do we do it safely and how do we continue to operate our economy and move it forward in a safe, smart way? And if we can continue that with Commerce and with the IDC and with our chamber and everybody else and each individual businesses who actually know their businesses more than we do, I think then we'll be able to move forward and people will start to be feeling a little more comfortable.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Squilla. Was there a follow-up or that was just a general statement?
No, it was just a comment. I think we need to have them involved in this, and that's all. So move forward, and hopefully we will.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Gim and then Councilmember Brooks, and then we're going to start our next panel because we're running very short on time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I think, many of my colleagues have spoken about the urgency of really focusing on small and local business and the importance of really establishing a strategy around that. But both Commerce and PIDC have also been involved with large-scale efforts to attract large businesses. The city of Philadelphia is struggling around tax revenue. I don't think there's any question that this is a very serious issue, and in particular, the shifting of revenue from employees who formerly worked in the city of Philadelphia out to our surrounding counties has had a dramatic impact on our income. On this, the two questions I have are, how is PIDC evaluating tax breaks and the types of tax breaks that they are offering or potentially offering, given the fact that tax revenue is so precious to us? And how can we ensure that these tax breaks to large-scale developments, not necessarily small businesses, are well spent, don't waste taxpayer money, especially when it's needed the most?
Sure. So we, from the PIDC perspective, don't have any direct engagement in any tax products that provide tax breaks at a local level. The primary product that we offer that relates to a tax credit is through the federal New Markets Tax Credit Program. And that program does specifically focus on projects that are located in low-income communities. So that is a primary criteria of eligibility for the program. And then in addition to that, it has to not only be located in a low-income community, but provide direct benefit across a range of things in terms of quality jobs or goods and services for the residents of that community. Examples might be a federally qualified health center, might be a grocery anchored neighborhood shopping center. Those are the types of projects that we focus on with that resource. Unfortunately, PIDC was not selected for this year to be an allocatee. There were actually no organizations that just serve Philadelphia or Pennsylvania that were selected for that. So we are focused on working with the national allocatees of those credits to try to bring that investment to Philadelphia from the national organizations that have access to that resource this year.
And that doesn't include hotels or things like that? Those are not included in the New Market Tax Credit?
I would say typically not, at least certainly not in recent years. I am not aware in the last maybe 5 years or so of hotel projects either here or generally in the country being a recipient of new markets tax credits. I think there's always a question in terms of, the hospitality industry because it does create a lot of jobs that could be seen to have the type of benefit that the program is intended to support. But I think that there's been, some controversy around that nationally going back, a number of years. And so I don't think you see it recently, either here or elsewhere.
And maybe I could be more specific by saying that sometimes PIDC does help industries file for like RCAP grants at the state level.
Yes, so we have so our role in the redevelopment assistance capital program is primarily focused on supporting the projects that after they're awarded by the Commonwealth, the funding comes through us, where we play a supporting role, almost like an intermediary between the Commonwealth and the grant recipient for those grant recipients that are located in Philadelphia. There is a round that is open now, so we are trying to, publish and promote that through our networks and in partnership with the city and planning and development as well, to, try to make folks make folks aware of that opportunity at the state level that is available.
And could you just talk a little bit more about how you are thinking about tax breaks for larger scale developments, given the city's need for tax revenue?
So I'm not sure that I would be the best to speak with that if it's related to something like the 10-year abatement or KOZ. I feel like Sylvie or Ann might be better positioned to answer. I think certainly, from the PIDC perspective, if there's any sort of specialized financing that we would be looking at putting into a project, we would absolutely be looking at, criteria in terms of, what are the jobs it's creating, what are the, impacts that a project is going to be having on its surrounding community, positive or negative, and we would absolutely, be considering those factors in terms of any lending or resources that we might be putting in.
Yeah, I know that there's been some questions about some of the projects that have been under consideration in the past. I just would like to urge PIDC to stay in close touch with council, because I do think it's important for us to really be focusing as many efforts and any dollars that PIDC can draw down, whether it's through federal money, through HUD, that it goes towards actual smaller businesses in neighborhoods and communities. And we try to avoid situations like the W Hotel, for example, downtown, being part of HUD money. And, as we go forward, I think we want to have a closer, more understanding relationship about how PIDC can best utilize city revenues and potential or future city revenues, as well as to grant money that is in your control, but we don't have a lot of say as much over. Sylvie, thank you so much for your work. I also want to acknowledge the work that you did, particularly around getting information out to our small businesses and to really being a good steward of making sure that there is a large diversity of businesses that were represented across the spectrum. So thanks for all of that work. You and I spoke briefly about some thoughts about the Keystone Opportunity Zone, how Commerce may be looking at it. I think that there's been some recent stories in the news that re-emphasize that the Keystone Opportunity Zone really does need a refresh. It's not something that we can do. Obviously, it's a state grant and a state program. You and I have worked together to try and just basically ascertain whether we can gather from self-reporting jobs that were created as a result, and we've struggled to get strong information even from there. But I thought it might be helpful just to talk a little bit on the record about some of the conversation that we had about the Keystone Opportunity Zone and how Commerce might be thinking about it in the future.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think that we know that there are some flaws to the program when it comes to, there are just certain areas where we would like to see some changes that would require legislative changes at the state level in terms of, so, you know, we all heard about the situation with KOZ hopping it's you know, that I think we'd like to look more closely at what's allowable there, as well as not having to reach out.
The state to create a new program. KOCs have been around for over 2 decades. I think we've been stuck within some of its limitations, including the fact that a contracted out cleaner may have to pay wage taxes, but a high-level partner who might be at a law firm would not, for example, have to pay wage taxes. So it's a complicated area, and I think it's important for us to think about it. But I think I want to reemphasize that the reason why I'm bringing these things up is that we have to recognize that some of the larger scale development incentives have flaws. We want to be thoughtful about our attention to them, and my real interest is to redirect PIDC, and we already work with Commerce, but on small business development and a real small business effort and strategy in a way that I think is desperately needed right now. So thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, Councilman McKim. Councilmember Brooks. We can barely hear you, Councilmember Brooks.
Can you hear me now?
Barely. We need you to speak a lot louder because people are saying they cannot hear you.
Okay. Kind of leaning to my colleague's comment, Mark Swilla, in terms of the connection between public health department and economy. I'm really concerned whether any connection or collaboration is happening around housing. The reason I bring up housing is because if we're going to see economic growth and we're talking about sustaining small businesses, bringing businesses into the city, we need to make sure that housing is affordable for not just high-level workers, but low-wage workers that run the hotels and run the restaurants and all of these things. And in order for us to do that, in order for them to be able to come back after this, we need to make sure that we have affordable housing available for workers in the city. And I was wondering, is that part of the conversation, or are housing people involved in this in any kind of way? Because we realize historically, after economic crash that this country has had, housing had to be a part of the conversation. And I think we need that currently here in Philadelphia in order to move forward. Is that happening?
Yes. So there are conversations, and I would say, honestly, there are ongoing conversations that we were having these conversations before all of this anyway. Because I think, it's been brought out that there's a very close nexus between health and housing. Unfortunately, that was one of the things during the pandemic that got a little bit, fell a little bit to the side, to be honest with you. We were just about to gear up a full push on our health and housing work. When the pandemic hit, we are trying to gear that up again. Even though we know that the health industry may be focused elsewhere, we agree with you, Councilwoman Brooks, that the pandemic has just underscored what we already knew about the nexus between health and housing. I think that's one of the reasons why, you saw us jump on the rental assistance piece as quickly as we did. We wish we had a more robust program. We wish we could assist all the all the households that need that assistance. Because particularly what we saw, in the last recession, and this is much worse, is that if we're not providing that assistance, both to keep tenants in their homes, but also to support our small landlords, is those units can get lost to foreclosure. And what happened in the last recession was that then when those go into foreclosure, banks do not want to be in the property owning, property management business, and they tend to sell them off in large chunks to major investors who are not that interested in making sure that they're taking care of local residents as much as they are in maximizing their profits. So that's a real risk, which is why we really jumped on rental assistance. And then also, we are making sure that when the forbearance on mortgages period expires, that we are ready to go. And we've been continuing our mortgage diversion program, but we're also ready to go to provide some additional capacity there. I think the challenge continues to be producing of housing that is truly affordable. for a couple reasons. One, it just costs too much, and so I think that's something that we're trying to look at different models. I will tell you that we're frustrated by all the requirements that are put on us by the federal government for not just the dollars that come to us, home dollars and community development block grant dollars, but also that come to our sister agencies in this work, the Housing Authority and the Office of Supportive Housing. We continue to look at innovative models, and then when we go to figure out how we can fund them, we kind of get crushed because there's some obscure rule that doesn't allow us to use dollars that way. But that being said, we are still trying to come at it from any way we can. And I think, really this is also very much an income issue that we need to address. So, for example, we know that the median income in our SMSA is $53,000, but in the city, it's $43,000. So when we produce at housing at 80% of median in our city, that is, really at over 100%. That's affordable to somebody at over 100% of our local median income. And, if there's for example, if there's a studio unit that's rented at 80% of median, that is a rent that's a little over $1,000 a month. In order to afford that and not be housing cost burden, which means not paying more than 30% of your income in rent, you need to be making $19.52 an hour. That's almost 2.7 times our minimum wage. And so we really need to come at this from both sides. We need to produce more affordable housing and make sure it's safe and quality, but we also need to work to get people's incomes up. And frankly, that minimum wage is insulting. And nobody can exist on that minimum wage, and we really have to come at it from that side as well, but we are definitely going to be coming at it from the health and housing piece.
Thank you so much, Ann, because I'm really concerned. I think that with the expectation of thousands of evictions coming at the same time, we're talking about building a workforce. If you're homeless and mentally burdened because of being homeless, it's really hard to take advantage of job opportunities that are popping up. So it's very important that we are focusing on, long-term effects of housing in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Iannuzzi.
Can't hear you, Frank.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Did you ask me to call the second panel?
Yes.
Susan Jacobson, Rob Wonderling, Atif Bostic, Ashley Putnam, and David Sim.
All for your patience. This is a very important topic with a lot of different facets to this issue. So thank you for your patience and appreciate
it. First, I want to thank both chairs, Derek Green and Councilman Squilla, and the other members of City Council that have joined today. We're having a bit of a technical difficulty. Our chair-elect, Sue Jacobson, was to lead off this testimony. I'm sure many of you have been receiving alerts on your phones throughout this morning around tornado and sheltering in place orders. About 3 minutes ago, we received a text from Sue that she has lost power at her location. So I'm going to kick off our testimony. Not sure if she'll be able to join us momentarily.
Rob, she is coming back in.
Very good. Thank you, Chairman Green.
Okay.
Hello, all. I'm actually on.
I see. Yes, sorry for the power.
I'm on with the lights out, but we continue.
Okay.
So good morning, Council Chairman Green, Council Chairman Squilla, members of the Joint Committees of Finance and Economic Development, and other council members. I'm Sue Jacobson, President of Jacobson Strategic Communications. Thank you for hosting what we believe is a really important hearing today, and for working with us in partnership as we look to take actionable steps to recharge Philadelphia's economy. Today's hearing allows us to really take the opportunity to provide an update on the Philadelphia Region Recharge and Recovery Task Force work that Sylvie talked about earlier. So what we did in this effort is we undertook a rigorous process with over 145 community and civic leaders to develop recommendations to restart our economy and grow in an equitable and inclusive way. And really, this is unprecedented anywhere to have this kind of involvement from this many leaders. This is a true differentiator for our city. And our goal for this hearing is to review that work that was completed, but most important, how do we take action immediately? And you know, I've been listening to council members speak, and this obviously is, we get it, we're with you, this is important, crucially important to us too. So what I'd like to do is highlight our guiding principles, because I think they're very important, and these principles have informed that recommendation. And I just again want to spend a minute to read this. The first of our values is to address the need for greater social justice, and using the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, as Councilwoman Parker said, equity and inclusion, to ensure that recommendations benefit all citizens, particularly focusing on people of color and our low-income communities that have been marginalized, and eradicate systematic racism that exists within our businesses and institutions, and consistent with the Chamber of Commerce's equity pledge. Our second value is to help the economy recover amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And the third is really to work with you. And again, thank you, Councilman, for putting this together, because we have to have a true public-private partnership to get done what we're all talking about. We all have those same, goals and sense of urgency. And then I just, again, want to spend a moment on our guiding principles. Again, partnering with you, right, county governments, the state, but particularly with all of you in the private sector, to fund and build capacity to ensure success. And also to defend our regional market share and attain greater market share. And I like to call this, yes, we've got to play defense, but let's play offense. And let's get greater market share. Let's bring it here to Philadelphia. Let's really move forward on that. And then let's look for connections across sectors to accelerate recovery. So, and I'm going to talk about those sectors in a moment, and growth. What differentiates us in Philadelphia, and what makes us great among all of those sectors, and how do we use those differentiators to really push us forward? And then finally, this particular group, our idea was, let's do this quickly. Like, let's find short and medium-term actions that will have clear measurements of success. Like, what can we do right now? Let's, yes, there are many things that we're all working on, that you're all working on, that have long-term implications, but what can we do to really drive change and, again, play offense right now? On the next slide, you'll see that the work that's been completed, we included extensive work within the subcommittees and outreach. As I mentioned earlier, 145 leaders were officially engaged in this. Actually, 38.6% were women. 43.3% of the leaders were people of color. It was just a very exciting group of people coming together. I have to say, you know how a lot of leaders send surrogates. There were no surrogates on any of these calls. People were truly engaged. And the sectors were and where we think the differentiators are, and I'm just going to read them because they're important. Life sciences, so there was a committee there, and you'll see the chairs. Financial services, higher education, tech, media, and telecom, small and medium-sized businesses, tourism, hospitality, arts and culture, healthcare, and talent and workforce. So those were the committees, those are the chairs, and then with each of those chairs, as I mentioned, were the other leaders in those spaces who came up with these short-term solutions that we can implement right away. The next slide. And just for a second here, just to give you a sense of the extensive nature of this, 8 subcommittee meetings, they were held. This was all done obviously in a short time frame. You know, you could just see the slide. There was a huge, impressive, all around. Everybody wants to be a part of this. Everybody wants to partner with the city, with you, the council members who are on this phone. This is something we all want to do together. And what I'm going to do now is transition over to Rob Wunderling. As you know, he's the CEO and president of the Chamber of Commerce, and he's going to talk about, I mentioned that we really wanted to start with 6 key initiatives to prioritize right away. What's that low-hanging fruit? What can we do right now to jumpstart things? Because I want to say one other thing. The last time we had an economic problem, basically we didn't move fast enough and we were left behind. And this time we can't do that. We've got to move forward. We've got to find those opportunities. We've got to find those differentiators, and we've got to move forward. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm now going to turn it over to Rob.
Well, thank you again, Chairman Green and Chairman Squirrel and other members of council. I do want to just amplify a couple of the points on the values before I move on to the next slide, and that is we fully subscribe to the fact that this recovery, and as we recharge the recovery, has to be all-inclusive and through the lens of social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's why it's the number 1 value. It also needs to be a true public partnership, and that's why we were heartened at the very outset of this work a couple of weeks ago to have the support of Governor Wolf, the county commissioners in Bucks, Chester, Montgomery, and Delaware counties, because the city is the center of gravity for our economy, but it's also a regional economy. The mayor of Philadelphia, Jim Kenney, Council President Clark, and in particular the Council President, I want to thank him for his leadership. He offered many of you, and many of you participated, or your staff participated in an interim draft readout of this work several weeks ago, a status and an update. And of course, the work will continue, which I'll touch on the advocacy agenda at the conclusion of my brief remarks. Next slide, please. So I am not going to spend time on the process of recommendations that came from those 8 subcommittees, but only to suggest before I talk about aspirations is our work was informed with a partnership we have with McKinsey & Company, and they took those 8 subcommittees that really are the 8 economic verticals that drive the economy of the city and the region, and they built for us a forecast, through the lens of the pandemic, the uncertainty of the insidious virus, job losses that had already been raised in questions this morning, and those vulnerable occupations, to Sylvie's comment to a question earlier this morning. And so that forecast used to inform the work and how we could recharge and recover as quickly as possible. Those 8 subcommittees, 140 plus individuals, were awesome. They came out initially with 60 recommendations. From our vantage point, that would have taken 60 years to implement. We whittled it down to 40. Still way too much for a short amount of time, and we're now operationalizing around 22 short and medium-term recommendations, and 6 in particular that have urgency that I think has been the spirit and tone of the questions and the comments being offered by our members of council this morning. We define short-term as between now and the second quarter of next calendar year, 2021, and medium-term through the year 2023. So even the definitions of short and medium, I think, are through the lens of urgency. Those recommendations, though, across the subcommittees clearly drove aspirational themes, rallying cries, if you will, that we know and very optimistically that we can become by working together. We can become a top global cell and gene therapy hub to create inclusive jobs for all of Philadelphians and its residents well into the next century. We can become a new national model to learn, apprentice, and work in the jobs of the future. We absolutely will be known as a place for investing in and growing small Black and brown owned businesses. We will be a digital with increased digital literacy, technology, and use. And this is a paramount requirement, the healthiest, most livable community in the northeastern United States. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we took from 60 to 40 to the 22 operating recommendations that we won't go through to today, but those 22 short and midterm recommendations roll into those 8 verticals. They're about playing offense and defense, whether it's for a hospitality sector, a life science sector, or a higher ed sector. Those 22 recommendations are embodied, and we welcome the opportunity as we continue to move this process to share those with this committee and council as a whole at the appropriate and future date. But we got to get to work, and we've already begun work quite candidly very quickly. And so these 6 represent table stakes. These 6 very short-term actionable items that require public-private partnership must be acted upon now if we have any hope of recharging our lost economy over the last several months. It doesn't matter whether you're a small business in a commercial corridor or a major hotel or a large not-for-profit higher ed institution. These are the 6 that require all of us to work on together. The first 3 in particular, and I think Councilman Squilla touched on this with his question, that we need to deploy and educate we need to deploy the infrastructure and educate our citizens, employers, and employees on the way to ongoing test and contact trace the virus. It's insidious, it's asymptomatic, it still exists, and will be for some point in time. Our view is this is critical infrastructure, no different than transit. Employers rely on a safe, healthy ride from SEPTA. We think building out in the city, working in cooperation with Dr. Farley and the county health departments through the county commissioners, the infrastructure necessary to conduct real-time tests and results, have the capacity, and to do contact tracing, and to provide the communication tools all around that is absolutely number 1 priority. If not, then we will have herky-jerky recovery. We'll continue to move from green to yellow and, God forbid, back to red phases, which is no way to run a city or an economy and will not provide the confidence that our citizens need to get back to some type of normal life and what the private sector needs to be able to provide those economic opportunities and jobs for all of Philadelphia's citizens. Interrelated to that is a healthy and safety pledge. Our brothers and sisters in the hospitality industry are out first on this, and we're looking at that as well as other pledges in the manufacturing sector that everybody agrees to for their place of business. City council chambers, does not matter, as to agreeing to what we will do to create safe and healthy places for all. So again, that's critical table stakes infrastructure. But to the question, I think it was Councilman Dom that asked Sylvie, our interim commerce director, we have a high number of unemployed and a high number of individuals that are in vulnerable occupations as we speak. On a regional basis, that number is about 735,000 individuals that have been recently laid off due to the pandemic and related economic shocks, or, according to McKinsey and Company, are in extremely vulnerable occupations that could be eliminated due to the advancement of technology or reoccurring outbreaks of the virus that cannot be contained. And so we're going to get to work immediately to begin to reskill those individuals to move towards a process of skills-based hiring. The good news here is that there are already opportunities. It's projected right now that we have north of 140,000 vacant positions in the city and the region alone. That number will continue to grow to over 200,000 high-demand occupations, well above living wage occupations that will be provided. So we are going to need to work together to get everybody organized, get the training they need, and get redeployed. The private sector is committed to doing this. There are a host of intermediaries from Philly Works to grassroots organizations committing to do this. It's how we scale and scale quickly. And then finally, this is one that we're very excited about because all it takes is commitment by an individual business, whether a small commercial corridor shop located in a neighborhood in our city or a very large anchor employer. And that is to double down, to increase by a minimum the doubling of local procurement, particularly for Black and brown enterprises. A shared commitment, an individual commitment to procure locally and to do so for Black and brown and Latinx enterprises can be accomplished in a short amount of time. We already know that a number of major employers and small enterprises are working to determine the best way for them to honor that commitment. We'll be more to announce that as we turn the corner on Labor Day. And as Sylvia Gallier-Howard suggested, that each enterprise is at a different place in learning how to do this. And once again, we are blessed with a host of intermediaries that can assist and provide those points of connection for Black and brown enterprises. Next slide, please. I'm going to skip this. Next slide. That's just a summary of where we are in process. So I think it was Councilman Sanchez that mentioned metrics, and a couple other council members did. We have metrics under design that will measure our progress on a quarterly basis. They involve everything from measuring household income and growth thereof over the next couple of years to the redeployment of individuals that have been displaced to greater investment in our life science community. We're building that dashboard, as I mentioned, as we speak. However, I think this graph tells it all. It's absolutely stunning to all of us that we lost over 8% of our gross domestic product in one fell swoop with the outbreak of COVID-19. And if you look at the bottom line, if we do nothing, we will have a very slow recovery. And by the way, it probably won't be that inclusive to the theme and our values. And in fact, that line is optimistic, the blue line, in that it might actually recover due to macroeconomic conditions, but does not factor in continued social unrest, another virulent strain of COVID, dare I say, 20 versus 19, and all the uncertainties that come with a global pandemic. However, if we execute against the 22 recommendations and the 6 short-term action items I've outlined this morning, then we can accelerate growth in the economy. We can provide jobs, inclusive jobs, and we can recharge and recovery. No, this is not a plan. This is an initiative. A lot of planning, as Sylvie said, went into organizing this initiative, but it's just the beginning. There's a lot of hard work required going forward, and I know I speak for many in our organization that we look forward in this strong and continued partnership with all of you, our members of City Council. So with that, Chairman Green, let me turn the discussion now to Atif Bostic. Atif was very active in our group, and he'll be carrying our presentation forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Rob. Good afternoon, Councilman Green, Councilman Squilla, and members of the Joint Committees of Finance and Commerce and Economic Development. For those that don't know me, I'm Atif Bostic. I'm the CEO of Leadership in Business and Business Consultancy and the Executive Director of Uplift Solutions, a nonprofit focusing on workforce development. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify on Resolution 200336. Understanding the time that we have, I will keep my comments fairly brief. Over the last few months, I've been working very closely with the Recharge and Recovery Task Force to identify recommendations to aid in our economic recovery. In order for Philadelphia's economy to fully recover from the devastating impacts of COVID-19, both the public and private sector must work together to build an economy that fosters inclusive and equitable growth. The goal throughout this process was to create actionable and practical recommendations that can happen in the short and medium term to accelerate inclusive and equitable growth. Growth intentioned and designed to lift residents out of poverty. As you know, small businesses make up 99.7% of the U.S. employer firms, 64% of net new private sector jobs, 49.2% of private sector employment, and 42.9% of private sector payroll. It is clear stabilizing small businesses will be vital to our recovery. With many small businesses devastated by the pandemic, we should be hyper-focused on helping them get back on their feet and ultimately succeeding. To achieve this goal, moving forward, we should find ways to provide affordable technical assistance to small and mid-sized businesses to help them gain access to the necessary capital, identify market opportunities, and effectively shift their businesses to the changing environment. In my consulting practice, I've found while some businesses are aware of funding opportunities, they're not prepared or understand how to access them. Equally, they don't have the support to evaluate the environment and make the necessary operational changes. This is especially true of Black and brown businesses. We also have to ensure equitable access to capital for small and mid-sized businesses through both public and private sources. This would include the funding discussed by Ann Nevins with PICDC this morning. While we made great strides in making capital available, we need to ensure we create awareness to those capital opportunities, along with the resources to access them. We also have to ensure that businesses have access to capable workforce through the expansion of workforce development training programs, focusing on those high-demand jobs and in-demand roles that Rob Warngling just spoke about, and further incentivize the hiring of our most vulnerable populations to include the formerly incarcerated individuals. While this is nowhere near an exhaustive list of everything we should do, I believe it begins to move us in the right direction of a successful recovery. Thank you for hearing me this afternoon and your consideration toward my suggestions.
Thank you. I think we have Ms. Putnam and Mr. Sims to testify.
Hey, good morning. I'll go ahead and jump in here. So thank you, everyone. I hope everyone's internet is holding up okay in the storm. I just want to begin. My name is Ashley Putnam. I direct a strategic initiative at the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia that's focused on economic growth and mobility. And before I start, I do want to note that my views expressed here today are mine alone. I do not represent the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia or the Federal Reserve System. Really pleased today to be testifying to you about the role we were able to play and the work that's being done on the Recharge and Recovery Task Force. My work is focused on economic mobility, which is important in times of growth, but this need for resilient communities is never more important than this moment we are in and in times of crisis. As of today, we know that 1.9 million individuals have claimed unemployment in the state of Pennsylvania. And even in the Philly, Camden, Wilmington metropolitan area, we have at this point in time at least a 14% unemployment rate. The people behind these numbers are our neighbors, they are our family members, and they are our local business owners. They're also consumers, entrepreneurs, job creators, and really vital parts of our regional economy. And that's why these collective efforts are so important. Even before the pandemic, we know that our economy was not working for everyone. We do some research called the Survey of Household Economics and Decision Making that found that Black and Latino households experience more economic insecurity and are less likely to be able to pay their monthly bills than other racial groups. These disparities in economic well-being persist even in times of growth. And in Philadelphia, our regional economy was growing. Even in 2018, we saw some huge disparities in unemployment rates between Black workers, nearly 14%, compared with non-white Hispanic workers at 4%. So we have to acknowledge if we're going to build for a better recovery, COVID-19 and the disruptions we're experiencing do not affect everyone equally. Research that we've done at the Fed from previous recessions shows that minority workers are likely to experience greater employment losses at the onset of a financial downturn, and may be slower to regain employment and rebuild assets during that recovery. This led us to conduct some research on the workers, small businesses, and neighborhoods who are going to be especially impacted by shutdowns. And we found back in April, which was very early into the pandemic, we were already seeing some exacerbations of those disparities, particularly that those who were going to be most affected were those who were already most at risk. Those are workers of color, individuals without a four-year degree, younger workers, and those who are economically insecure. And this research for us really emphasizes why this is an essential time to take an equity approach to recovery and why these kinds of collaborative efforts are really, really essential. We were really pleased to play a part in the Recharge and Recovery Task Force, and I got to serve a role on the Workforce and Talent Development Committee. And we think this is really critical to putting equity into action to ensure workers, businesses, and places that are most impacted are prioritized. For us, an equitable recovery means going beyond that back to normal. A lot of the conversations we had on the task force were about addressing underlying disparities that have perpetuated the economic inequality we are seeing amplified right now. For workers, that means addressing systemic barriers, including things like broadband access and childcare that can prevent people from returning to work. But it also means recognizing the skills that workers have beyond a four-year college degree. And this is something we've been talking about before the pandemic and something we think is really critical as employers start to think about what role they can play after the pandemic. Finally, an equitable recovery requires thinking critically about recovery and spending to make sure that the jobs we're creating provide economic stability. And as others have testified today, this also means thinking about minority-owned small business. We conduct a survey every year called the Small Business Credit Survey, and we know from that survey that minority-owned small businesses are most at risk in this moment, but also extremely important engines of job creation and economic opportunity. So that connection between economic development, small business, and job seekers is really critical to more equitable recovery. We were grateful to play a role on the Return to Recovery Task Force and look forward to continuing our work with our colleagues at the City of Philadelphia and the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia to center equity in our recovery efforts. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Ms. Putnam. Mr. Sims?
Good morning, everyone. My name is David Sims. I'm the artist and proprietor of Eatable Delights Catering, and I wanted to be here today to support the Economic Recovery Recharge initiative. I'm really here to learn more about how it is that I can be an asset to the city of Philadelphia. Just want to say that I have been one that has benefited from some of the initiatives. I've worked with the Commerce Department. I've worked with the City Council, all of the City Council members. I'm a very active member in the Wadsworth Business Community Association. I am one that has benefited from the in-store grant. I've worked with the Commerce Department. I've worked with Celine Wilson, and he's been very helpful, and all of the people in City Council has been very helpful. I also think that it's important during these COVID times for people to find their niche in finding out how they can partner. I work with Atif Bostic to utilize some of the classmates to offer them employment. I work with Andrea Custis at the Urban League to hire some of the formerly incarcerated people that has come through her program. And I just think that it's this time more than any time is for us to get together as small businesses to formulate and to find out how it is that we can be better together. I'm very happy to say that down the street there is another restaurant. Oh, it escapes my name real quick. But I've worked with other business owners so that we can get the information out so that I can tell people about the different initiatives and what the city of Philadelphia has. I just actually gave an application to another business owner, Robert from the Breakfast Boutique, so that he can capitalize on some of the things that the city has to offer. And just doing my part to be here to support council, to support the Chamber of Commerce, the African American, as well as the Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, of which I'm members of both, and do whatever it is that I can to make Philadelphia a stronger city.
Thank you, Mr. Sims, for being here and testifying, as well as all the panelists on this panel for the critical work that you're doing, from you, David, the entrepreneur, Ashley from the work at the Federal Reserve, and then also both for Sue, Rob, and Atif, the work to put together in this plan for recharge and recovery. My first question for the representatives from the chamber, my understanding is that this work will go into a report, some type of document that will be released. You have a general sense of when that will occur. I believe just what was presented today and what will come out later can be a hearing unto itself. We are up against a hard stop at 12:30 with the mayor's press conference, and so hopefully there'll be an opportunity to maybe come back at a later time once that document is done, and we can focus just on the work that you're doing and what additional information you've learned in compiling all the work and all the advocates you've brought together to do this initial work.
I'll answer that, Chairman Green. Absolutely, we would welcome that opportunity to return, not only to talk about its implementation and progress to date, but the other 22 recommendations. We are now scheduling for the morning of September 8th a public event where we'll be releasing progress to date on the initiative, which includes a document that is organic, that has the dashboard, the metrics, and progress to date. We chose not to just have a static conclusion to this first phase because there's so much work being done in real time. For example, over the weekend, we were lobbying the Pennsylvania General Assembly as they were marking up language for the $1.2 billion of federal CARES Act funds that have yet to be dispersed to the city of Philadelphia. And we came in with requests related to testing, contact tracing, small business, minority small business, and hospitality and destination tourism relief. And so our plan is to use our time wisely between now and September 18th so that when we have that next public gathering, if you will, we'll not just talk about the final results of the report, but we'll also be able to demonstrate progress because of the need to move so quickly.
Thank you. Due to the time, because it is 12:24, and we look forward to having an ongoing conversation. And so after we conclude with this hearing, we hope to reconvene additional hearing to have a more detailed conversation regarding the work that you're doing, preferably in that September time frame. I know Councilmember Jones has a question, but due to Councilmember Jones, is it a very quick question? And as you're...
Yes, I just want to end on what I started. Thank you that the Chamber of Commerce is not our grandfather's Chamber of Commerce, and look forward to the data to be shared so that we can make better decisions in council, particularly about the unintended consequences of growth, particularly in regional traffic assessments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Jones. I want to thank all of the witnesses that have already testified this morning. Those who have yet to testify, I want to thank you for your patience. What we're going to do because of the technical difficulties we had at the beginning of this hearing and the fact that we do have a hard stop at 12:30 with the mayor's press conference, I'm going to move from a public hearing into a public meeting and ask for a motion. And I ask our chair of the Commerce and Economic Development Committee, Mark Swilla, to make that motion to allow us to reconvene at 2:15. I hope that all of the people who are still scheduled to testify, who have not been able to testify, will be able to come back at 2:15 so we can hear their information. I appreciate your patience. This is a very important issue, very multifaceted issue because COVID-19 has impacted every aspect of our lives, and you can tell by the diversity of questions that we have had this morning into this afternoon. So with that, we're going to reconvene the hearing at 2:15 after the mayor's press conference, and I'm now going to move into a public meeting and ask my colleague, Councilmember Mark Swilla, to make a motion to allow us to reconvene at 2:15.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to move, reconvene the Committees on Finance and Commerce and Economic Development on resolution number 200336 at 2:15 today. Thank you.
Second.
The motion is properly moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. Thank you. We'll now come out of the public meeting, going back in the public hearing. I want to thank all of you for your patience, and hopefully we'll be able to reconvene with all of you at 2:15 to continue this important conversation. Thank you and take care.
Thank you. See you all then. All right, thank you. I see Councilmember Green is present. If you want to get started, and we could go from there. Councilmember Green?
Thank you. Councilmember Bullock, can you hear me?
I hear you.
All right.
Okay, we are now live.
Thank you, Council, Mr. Chair, of the Committee, myself, as I want to thank all of you earlier. Thank you for your peace and for this big convene. We have the panel introduced by Mr. Iannuzzi.
Frank, please read the list of the next people to testify.
I believe the available people include Jennifer Rodriguez, Zach Wilka, Beth McConnell, Jeff Guarancino, and Kendra Moore.
Welcome all. We could start in that order, I guess. Just state your name for the record and begin with your testimony.
What was it, Jennifer Rodriguez?
Yes, Jen, there you go.
Oh, there we go. Thank you so much, Councilman Green and Councilman Squilla. I'll be brief. So good afternoon, and thank you for hosting today's hearing. I am Jennifer Rodriguez, President and CEO of the Greater Philadelphia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. For the past 3 decades, GPHCC has been the leading voice developing, promoting, and advocating for Hispanic businesses in the Greater Philadelphia region, while encouraging the advancement and economic growth of the Hispanic community. Currently, as we all know, we are experiencing an unprecedented economic and health crisis, which is disproportionately affecting communities of color. As a result of the effects of COVID-19 in our economy, and in particular, our minority-owned businesses, we at the Greater Philadelphia Hispanic Chamber have developed a response strategy titled Recalibrate, Retool, Restart, or R+. We recognize that operating in the new normal will take more than simply turning on the lights. In fact, the small scale of Latino-owned businesses and their tendency to have low cash reserves, combined with the customer-facing nature of their operations, means that they are being disproportionately impacted by social distancing rules. Latino-owned businesses are mostly comprised of restaurants, bodegas, beauty salons, construction firms, auto repair shops, and other services in which working from home is just not feasible. In fact, according to Stanford University, a survey of Stanford University Latino-owned businesses conducted early in the crisis, they indicated that up to 66% would be out of business in 6 months if restrictions were to continue. We unfortunately are just a few weeks away from that 6-month mark. In response to these challenges, GPHCC has realigned its programs and created new ones. Our R+ campaign has several components. One is the bilingual coronavirus resource page, where entrepreneurs can find updated information in Spanish, breaking the language barrier and ensuring that we are all informed. 2, we have created Play, a video library with relevant business topics, which informs our members and the community at large of available resources like PPP loans and how to apply. We have also developed Resolve It in 30, a bi-weekly technical assistance coaching session where experts talk about best practices and solutions to everyday business challenges. We have developed Dine Latino Takeout Weekend, a social media campaign that promotes our regions and our city's Latino-owned restaurants. And we have also created a Latinx Small Business Relief Fund, a grant program for which we are currently fundraising. At GPHCC, we are committed to help Latino-owned businesses recover from the impact of the coronavirus, positioning them for the successful reintegration into the economy under the new normal. But this requires a shared voice and collective action. As business leaders, as community leaders, and as residents of the city, we must do our due diligence and not just stopping the spread of the virus, but also to prepare for a safe, equitable, and robust economic recovery. Thank you so much for holding today's hearing about this crucial topic. And the leaders, staff, and members of GPHCC are ready to work with you to build a stronger and safer Philadelphia for all. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I think we'll wait till everybody testifies and then see any questions by council members. Franklin, to read the next testimony, please.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. You want me to call on the next witness, or you want me to actually read the testimony?
No. I'm sorry. Call on the next witness to testify.
Zach Wilka?
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Zach, you sound good. Just state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon.
Hold on one second.
Good afternoon.
Yes, you're on at the hearing. Please mute yourself while we're hearing testimony.
Yes.
Is that Miss Judith Robinson?
Yes, it is.
Okay, can you just say your name for the record and then mute yourself until it's your time to speak, please?
Judith Robinson, Queen Judith Robinson. I mute myself.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Zach. You want to start over and state your name and then continue with testimony.
No problem at all. Good afternoon, co-chairs Green and Squilla, council members, and the committees of Finance, Commerce, and Economic Development. I am Zach Wilka, Executive Director of the Independence Business Alliance, and I thank you for having me here today to testify on behalf of the IBA, which is Greater Philadelphia's LGBTQ+ Chamber of Commerce. We are a membership-based organization dedicated to making the Philadelphia region an influential and diverse LGBTQ+ business community with an impact on economic development, business equality, and policy issues. The IBA serves more than 900 professionals across 325 member businesses, and there are more than 60 certified LGBT business enterprises in IBA's footprint, which collectively employ more than 500 individuals and generate nearly $500 million of revenue each year. I echo much of what people have said before me today, and especially Jennifer Rodriguez. Before I tell the ongoing story of our community and our businesses during this economic downturn and health pandemic, I want to thank the City of Philadelphia and the Commerce Department and PIDC especially for so quickly responding to the unprecedented crisis at hand with a program of loans and grants that benefited many of our small business enterprises. The fast-acting city officials provided economic leadership that was not coming from the federal level, and I'm grateful for their efforts. When talking to my other chamber peers across the country and other cities, many of them look to Philadelphia as a model of rapid response. And though the program could not possibly meet the great demand of our business community, its effects surely mitigated what could have been the genesis of a larger disaster. I also want to stipulate that LGBTQ+ folks are a vertical that runs through every other community and is applied to anything I talk about today. Queer people who intersect with other minority communities have had a harder time through this crisis than their counterparts because of intersectional, systematic oppression with classism, racism, ableism, misogyny, and sexism. The LGBTQ+ community has endured through this crisis, but of course, LGBTQ+ folks in BIPOC and trans communities have been adversely affected in worse ways, both quantitatively and qualitatively. We stand in solidarity with all of those doing anti-racist work in the city and all of those championing and centering trans voices as well. Generally, minority-owned businesses in Greater Philadelphia have struggled to apply or receive funds from the Small Business Administration's Paycheck Protection Program. People of color in Philadelphia are disproportionately underbanked and underfunded, as are minority-owned and disadvantaged businesses from the LGBTQ+ space. The COVID-19 crisis and the rollout of PPP both highlighted and exacerbated this problem, as minority businesses have had difficulty navigating the federal loan program and competing with better networked companies. It makes sense for banks to lend customers with whom they have existing relationships, of course, but that system has left innumerable amounts of small businesses behind. Under normal circumstances, those practices would be more understandable, but as you know, these are far from normal times. The small businesses defined by the federal government for PPP eligibility are not what local leaders understood to mean by small. Companies with under 500 employees are not the same as solo photography businesses. Those large companies have a significant leg up on their smaller counterparts when it comes to getting financed. And of course, we have seen on the news so many large businesses and religious institutions receiving money that we were told would be distributed to small businesses. Members of the IBA, when possible, have been trying to pivot their businesses to the reality of remote work and help each other by offering discounted services. We've created a system of distributing information about key corporate resources as well. We continue holding network events online that are well attended and have been able to drum up business and make connections. But we also hear horror stories about what our members have gone through. Some who had a faulty tax issue, which was not their fault, prevented them from receiving city funds. Predatory landlords who retaliated against tenants. Those that didn't have the wherewithal or connections to apply for funding on time or correctly. I worry that when minority-owned businesses shut down, many other organizations, some of them corporate and city-based, will lose their suppliers. Companies in the IBA often supply local arts organizations and nonprofits, and the ripple effects from their closures could be tremendous. Our folks are trying to be optimistic, but also realistic about what lies ahead. We need continued concentrated support for minority-owned and disadvantaged-owned businesses, and it would be incredible to see more support aligned with helping folks pay rent and mortgages as the moratoria on them come abruptly to an end. And innovative solutions like the street closures to create safe spaces for outdoor commerce, and clarity around safe and healthy long-term planning to the extent that it's possible. Specifically, so many LGBTQ+ owned businesses are in the hospitality and event space. And in our own neighborhood, many folks rely on gatherings to make a living. In the world of COVID-19, however, large gatherings have been strictly and sensibly prohibited, as it usually animated restaurants and bars for more than 4 months as Philadelphia digs its way out of the pandemic shutdown. The restaurant concepts now lean on creative strategies like to-go cocktails and modified outdoor dining to generate revenue with strict social distancing guidelines and capacity reductions in place. LGBT businesses are often small, community-based, and privately owned. The ability to host events and gather people is a hallmark of queer business, and this is important both economically and psychologically. Historically, LGBTQ spaces have served as safe spaces for often marginalized queer community. Our folks, many of whom may be estranged from their biological families, gather in business establishments with friends and chosen family who accept and understand them. As such, many of the neighborhood hospitality business leaders say that the concepts and Philadelphia's LGBT residents are encountering a unique challenge as essential community spots navigate the new normal. Some businesses might not make it, while others will learn to make surviving with 50% occupancy or more viable each day. People strive to gather socially in good and bad times, and the places that provide space to come together over food and drink will always exist. Then many grapple with the fact that we have already lost virtually a generation of gay men in the 80s and 90s due to a deadly virus. Even with medication or a vaccine, we anticipate that this pandemic could change the way that our community and so many other communities socialize for quite some time in the future. If Philadelphia's LGBT establishments and businesses and vendors have a difficult time reopening in the long run, it will be because of fears of COVID-19. Leave that behind. Queer folks have endured previous health crises before and are familiar with the importance of keeping themselves and loved ones safe, while also being eager to return to socializing and doing business. For some folks, they're the only places where people can authentically be where they are. So the fact that our queer spaces can't open for gatherings has had real and significant psychological impact on our community. In any case, I want to make very clear that the IBA is committed to working with the City of Philadelphia and the Commerce Department on solutions that will steady Philadelphia on the road to recovery. And we are happy to partner in any way to aid your work in helping our businesses survive.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you for your testimony. Is there any, Frank, is there anybody else to testify from panel 3? Was Tiffany or Nick here?
I don't believe Tiffany Gilbert or Nick Shenoy are on the line.
Okay, I know there was a question for that panel. If Councilmember Dom had a quick question, and then we could go on to the next panel.
Thank you, Chairman Squill and Chairman Green. I just have a quick question for Jennifer and Zach. Do you know if your members have been able to spend the PPP dollars in a way that qualifies them for loan forgiveness, or will they end up having to take on long-term debt?
So from our perspective, from what we understand, the members have been able to utilize the funding appropriately. We have not heard too many problems in the utilization of the funds. We did hear very early on about a lot of concerns related to particularly, restaurants being able to use it, but we find that those have not materialized so far.
Okay. So in general, people are using it. They're not going to have long-term debt because, coming out of this is bad enough, but coming out of this with more debt from this would be really bad. So that's good news. Anyway, thank you both. Thanks for what you're doing, and thank you both, Chairman Squilla and Chairman Green. Thank you.
You're muted, Councilmember Squilla.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Frank. I see Mr. Garcina is up there to testify. Is that who's next?
Yes, Mr. Chair. He'll be joined by Beth McConnell and Kendra Moore.
All right, Jeff. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Just state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony. And then after you three are done, we'll have questions from council members. Thanks.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Green, Chairman Squilla, council members, and members of the committee. My name is Jeff Guarcino. I'm president and CEO of Visit Philadelphia, the official regional marketing organization of the 5-county region. For 25 years, we've told the positive news of Philadelphia and have built the regional tourism economy here. And I want to say that I'm grateful for this opportunity to represent this industry on behalf of my colleagues from the Philadelphia Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Convention Center, PHL Airport, the Greater Philadelphia Hotel Association, and so many others who are grateful for this opportunity to talk to you about what's happened to our industry. Personally, as a resident of Philadelphia and someone who was born here, I want to thank you and all of council for your leadership in this time of crisis. And I will say to you that our industry is here to work with council. We are partners. We believe that we can come out of this crisis to an even greater city and an even greater region. And if our recovery is done correctly, if it's immediate, if it's urgent, we actually believe we can grow our market share and we can grow our industry over time, and we can put more people back to work. And so today, with the opportunity to provide this testimony, I'll be brief. We want 3 points to make to this committee that are short-term return on investments that are immediate. The first is jobs. We need to get our friends and our family and our neighbors back to work. The second, we need to generate tax revenue for the city of Philadelphia via tourism to fund the priority programs that are so important to all of us who live here. Remember, tourists pay the tax, and 45 million people came to the greater Philadelphia region to have fun. And the third point is equity in the recovery, especially for small businesses in our neighborhood corridors. Our priority as an industry is to rebuild quickly. It's critical to our economy to bring back the leisure visitors who come just for fun, our meetings and conventions, the events, business travel, and we must continue to support our very successful airport. And we agree as an industry that one of the first things that we need to do is marketing, to get the word out about our city, what's happening in our city, the hotels, the restaurants, the shops, the attractions, why you want to have your wedding here, and the many, many reasons to visit. Through marketing, we know that we can support demand. We know that we can get people to come here and to support our attractions and to, most importantly, support the jobs that we need to get people back to work. Speaking of jobs, my first major point, I want to make sure that all of council knows that 69,000 people who support themselves and in their households who live in Philadelphia County work in our industry. I am very sorry to tell you that 44,000 people and growing are currently out of work. These are 6,000 residents per city council district who may live in North Philadelphia but may work in South Philadelphia, who may live in West Philadelphia but may work in Old City at these hotels and attractions and shops. They are out of work. This is a job crisis immediately in every single neighborhood. And in our region, 58% of hospitality workers are out of work. That's 111,000 jobs lost in our region just since March. In the hospitality industry in this country, more than 50% of our colleagues are out of work, and that will grow. That is 5 times more than the Great Recession. We know that these jobs provide equitable access to family-sustaining careers. And we know that tourism will rebound quickly. We do see the data and the research that because of Philadelphia's location, because that we're popular with leisure tourists, because people can drive here, because we have a great reputation, because we have festivals and events, because of our neighborhoods, and because that we're a great dining city, people will come and we will rebound. I'm very also proud of our industry, of our commitment and track record for diversity and inclusion at every single level within our industry. And for Visit Philadelphia, I'm very proud that 44% of our employees here are diverse, and our management team reflects the diversity of Philadelphia. Because of COVID, our industry is disproportionately hurting vulnerable and diverse Philadelphians in every single neighborhood. And so one of the first things that we could do was launch visitphilly.com/jobs, which is all the available jobs open in the hospitality industry, in the attractions, in the restaurants, and in our hotels that are open now. That's the first way to give a one-stop shop to our friends and neighbors who need to get back to work. The second point that I want to make for this testimony is that the hospitality industry generates tax revenue for the city's general fund. We are self-supporting as an industry through the hotel tax. The hotel tax is decimated. It would create millions and millions of dollars for the city, for the state, for the debt service in the Pennsylvania Convention Center, and to fund the tourism marketing promotion. Last year, $342 million to the city's general fund came from tax revenue paid by tourists. And that funds our priority programs, and it funds the school district. That's $244 million to the general fund and $24 million to the school district. Visitors spend money in our attractions, in our shops, in hotels, and buy the drink tax. And they support all of us who work to support their visit. The third thing I wanted to mention, and I will close with this, is that we can rebuild at this time with equity and inclusion as our priority. We can do it through our hiring and contracting. We can do it by driving business to our neighborhood corridors and shining a spotlight on the restaurants and the shops and the people who give Philadelphia its character and its distinctiveness. So our first priority is to work with you at council for your ideas, for you to help inform how we can recover immediately through marketing, and to ask for your ongoing vocal support for our friends and neighbors who need to get back to work to support their families, and for the small business owners who depend not only on us as locals to be a tourist in our own hometown and to discover this great city in this region, but also for the visitors who will jump in their Uber and their Lyft and go to Frankfurt Avenue and go to North Philadelphia at the Met and go and explore and help get our economy recovered for all. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Councilman.
Frank, is there someone else to testify? I think it was Beth maybe next, and then Beth, yeah, if you're there, if you want to just state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony, then we'll ask questions when you're done.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairpersons Green and Squilla. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Beth McConnell. I'm the Policy Director at the Philadelphia Association of CDCs, PACDC. I'll shorten my testimony. I submitted longer written testimony. But I do want to say I convened PACDC's Commercial Corridor Working Group and have for the last several years, which is a gathering of staff of CDCs and BIDs, business improvement districts, that manage between 20 to 30 of our neighborhood corridors. And we also partner very closely with the Commerce Department and Philadelphia LISC in supporting corridor management. And I want to just say the last 5 months have really underscored how absolutely vital our corridor managers are in helping small businesses manage and recover from crises. They have been the direct conduit to small businesses to ensure that they're informed about COVID-related limits on business activity and procedures to limit the virus spread. They made sure business owners knew about grant and loan programs, helped them complete applications, served as translators, and really help guide overwhelmed business owners who are seeing their whole lives slip away hand by hand through this process. So we have worked with them to our corridor working group to draft a series of policy recommendations for getting through the immediate emergency of COVID. You can see our full policy agenda at pacdc.org, but I'm just going to highlight 4 recommendations today, each of which we are actively working with Commerce Department and LISC and other partners to find the resources and tools to implement, and would love the support of council. First, we really need some support for an enhanced program to help small businesses avoid eviction, foreclosure, or other legal action over debt. Beginning this month, small businesses in Philadelphia that have COVID-related debts can file with the Commerce Court in the First Judicial District to initiate a process that would allow for negotiation with many types of creditors. It's similar to the residential mortgage foreclosure diversion program that we have here in Philadelphia, but with some important differences. But to make the most of that court's new process, we also need the wraparound services that we have with foreclosure diversion. We need outreach to business owners to get them to participate, much like the NACs do with homeowners. We need expanded technical assistance to help businesses find resources to address debt and strengthen their business, much like we do with housing counselors. We need a system to match attorneys, whether they're volunteer or for hire, to business owners that can't afford to find an attorney on their own. And we need translation and interpretation supports throughout this entire process. Second, we really need to set up a citywide data system to know what about our small businesses. We really learned from this COVID crisis that we lack really critical data. That includes contact info so we can reach them when they're closed, what category of business they operate, whether it's retail or restaurant or some other form, what languages they speak, whether they use e-commerce, do they rent or own their building, and so on. A more comprehensive system of data would allow us to better target our outreach for assistance programs, evaluate the impact of these programs, and also serve unmet needs, know what they are. We are making some progress with this thanks to the support of Commerce and JP Morgan Chase for a data management pilot program that was launched on 4 quarters pre-COVID. We need more resources and also an assessment of what public data is out there that we can rely on, what new data needs to be collected through our various public agencies, and how to make that publicly available in useful formats. Third, we really need to boost property ownership on corridors. Earlier in the hearing, I believe Commerce Director Gallia Howard and PIDC Director Ann Nevins discussed this, but significantly boosting the resources that are available to purchase buildings and properties on our commercial corridors by small businesses as well as CDCs. We also really need to see the land bank play a larger role in acquisition and disposition of property on corridors that really do not have the resources to pay attention to commercial acquisition and disposition as much as we need them to. And this is a moment where we really need to have property on our corridors that is owned by the people and institutions that have the greatest investment in its success and build local wealth equitably. And finally, programs like storefront improvement and in-store have been very successful, but new times call for new approaches. So we need programs that will help business owners make critical health and safety repairs or reconfigurations inside their stores to address deferred maintenance that poses health and safety risks and make changes that will allow for social distancing. In closing, PACDC is so grateful that Council and the Kennedy administration have continued support for corridor management programs despite budget deficits that have led to very painful cuts across the city. And we hope that commitment will continue as we work to get our small businesses back to full capacity as soon as safe and expand that work even further to cover more corridors to spur an equitable economic recovery. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Beth. Appreciate your testimony, and I believe that Kendra was next to testify. Hi, Kendra, we see you. Just state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, council members, Squilla and Green in particular, and other committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to Resolution 200336. My name is Kendra Moore. I'm the Government Relations Manager for the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia. As my colleagues have said today, and as you all know, COVID-19 is destroying our local economy and reinforcing racial disparity and marginalization. At the same time, we are also facing a climate crisis. And these challenges are demonstrating to us how important our local businesses are to our recovery as well as to our communities. As Philadelphia looks to stabilize and recover in the coming months and years, this is really an unprecedented time, an opportunity for us to rebuild better based on our small businesses, as well as climate resilience and equitable growth. At SBN, we're actually doubling down on these by turning inward, but also engaging our members and supporting their efforts to contribute to strong growth, equitability, as well as climate resilience. For example, we're transitioning to a new sliding scale dues membership model, which will allow us to provide benefits more equitably to our members, regardless of their financial circumstances. And as others have mentioned, we've seen the city take action, which we appreciate as well. For instance, PIDC in the city garnered resources quite quickly to provide emergency microloans to disadvantaged businesses, particularly those from historically marginalized backgrounds. And we also supported efforts to prompt financial institutions to offer debt relief and efforts to protect businesses from evictions. In addition, United Way, PIDC, and Commerce are convening diverse voices through their Small Business Ecosystem Project, which will ensure that our recovery is based on best practice as well as equitable and inclusive growth. And moving forward, the city should continue to build on these efforts to advance equity and climate resilience. First, primarily, we see that investing and prioritizing local business development is key to this success. Second, creating opportunities for and investing in historically marginalized communities and those business owners. And third, sparking innovation and long-term growth in green infrastructure as well as our local food systems. My written testimony provides more detail on each of these, which I hope to cover with you in the coming days, weeks, and months. I do appreciate the opportunity to share these brief thoughts with you today and look forward to working with you. SBN members look forward to working with you and partners to build a just, green, and thriving Philadelphia. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendra. Thank you for your testimony. Before we ask for any other questions, Frank, is there, I believe Judith is on the line to testify. Is there anybody else on the line to testify?
I believe Ms. Robinson is the last person waiting to testify, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Judith, if you're available, if you would unmute yourself and state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony, then we'll have questions from any members of the committee.
Yes, good afternoon. Good day. Can you all hear me?
We hear you fine.
Thank you. Queen Judith Robinson here, testifying on Resolution 200336. I want to say that no one of us is smarter than all of us. Taxes are paid by the poor too, that drink by the tax, liquor by the tax drink, the soda tax, sales tax, so leave no one behind. I am here again advocating for the unfortunate situation that we find black women in this town, okay, of every ilk, okay? It's a disgrace what has been going on in our community as it relates to so-called minorities. It was hell before COVID, and we're catching hell after it. You know, we are the worst in every area, health, this, that, and the other. So I want to make sure that you all pay attention as you talk about the new norm and who's included and all of that. We're supposed to have been included for eons in everything, but it didn't happen. And you all are talking to some of the same people, to yourselves, who couldn't get it done before COVID. But I saw something very interesting I want to focus on a couple of times with the black doctors. Excuse me, you all went gangster for them. Do it for the roofer. Do it for the nurses. Do it for everyone else. You know, they were supposed to get part of a contract. Didn't get this, didn't get that. And then I sort of hustle and bustle around that. Every business stands on their own initially. We know that all is true. But we're in a pandemic. So coming out of it, let's think differently. Let's think of how we really can be inclusive. And we want the same gangster treatment that you all gave for those doctors for the roof with everybody else. Okay? Do that. Make that the new norm. Let me see how you're working with that. Then I want you all to include apprenticeship, internships, everything you can to get people working. I heard the gentleman with the tourism say, yes, jobs. I'm part of the tourism industry. I'm a tour guide up in North Philly. Wouldn't think of it up there, but we want to bring equity so our youth can be tour ambassadors to the world. Yeah, bring it on back, but make sure you include us uptown. We got more history. We could write 2-3 history books, okay? In the name of tourism, uptown, all of that. And we even have new businesses in this crisis. So I just want to make sure I encourage you all to use your power and show us what you're working with as you include everybody in this new normal. I'm going to say this because I want to just hit these boards and commissions. Every board and commission, especially where there's money. I saw on earlier you all had the head of all of the development, all of that. Every agency, every board and commission, pull them in and make that money flow. Make it flow all around, okay? Access to capital is the major problem. Access to capital. PRA was at the table. I was there last August, and I know I'm going to have to do a right to know to get this information, but there was a pilot program created where they were giving out money, and you didn't have to start paying for 30 years. My background is in real estate finance, and you know my ears perked right up. Find out about that. But upon inquiry, just a cursory inquiry, I was told, oh, that's a pilot program. Well, if I wasn't there at that board meeting last August, I would have known anything about it. It came and gone. Somebody got some of that money. Find out how many black people got money. How many black businesses got money? How many loans are given to black people out of PRA? Bunch of money up in there. PHCC, same thing. Any company that's working for PHCC, make them grow. If you've been having them as part of PHCC for all these years, let me see you double up on them and then tell them to go in the neighborhood and get some of these boys on the corner and include them who want to work in their expanding business. You claim we only have 2%. Let's double it to 10% by just being inclusive. Let's use our heads. Let's include our youth who are here. Let's not waste this opportunity. In regards, I just want to close by saying, leave no one behind. African American women are definitely going to be under the gun. If they were already 70% of yearly evictions, my God, what's going to happen next? We're going to have to wrap our arms around them with their women and children. I live up here near the Woodstock shelter. Get the women out of them shelters into PHA housing, where they're supposed to be, income-based housing. We can do it, you all. Invite other people in the room who maybe don't agree with you all, who are not spouting the same thing over and over again, who have expertise, okay? Invite us all in the room because we can't figure it out. We tore down the whole country. If you had listened long before, I've been down there testifying about this mess for the past 25 years. You could have saved the whole country, okay? Now you wait till they tear up the whole country. Now we got to figure it out. Okay, that's enough. Have a good day, and thank you very much for the opportunity to attend this hearing. Queen Judith, signing off.
Thank you, all of the witnesses today. Councilman Don, do you have a question? Because I know we're getting close to end time. Got a question.
Mr. Chair, it's very hard to hear you.
Councilmember Dom, the question? Can you hear me?
Hello?
Councilmember Dom? Tom? Are there any additional questions, members of the committee? One last question. Are there additional questions?
Councilmember Green, this is Councilmember Squilla. I have one question before we exit, and I guess it was from Mr. Garcina, if he's still available. I know the challenge as the travel industry, the hotel industry, and Philadelphia has really relied on a lot of income based on that. Have you guys put together a plan to the City of Philadelphia, the Health Department, of how we could come back safely, smartly, by having this industry back up and running, and maybe differently than it was before, but in a way that's safe, so that we coordinate together with the Health Department and the City of Philadelphia to show the world that the City of Philadelphia is now getting to a place where we could start accepting visitors back to the City of Philadelphia?
Thank you for the question, Councilman. I'm proud to report that the tourism and hospitality industry in this city and in this region, from the airport to the convention center to the visitor center to Visit Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Convention and Visitors Bureau, we are united. We meet weekly, every Thursday at 9 o'clock to talk about our challenges, our recovery, and how to get people back to work and restart the economy. We have been looking at and have been deploying, first and foremost, how do we communicate out what the City of Philadelphia has been doing and our businesses to accommodate visitors safely and to accommodate their workers and to ensure that when people come here, that they will have a good, safe experience. I can tell you that we are leading the country in terms of the investments at the airport, the convention center, all of us have been making. And so that is a story we need to continue to tell. People are very concerned about travel. 3/4 of the traveling public are not traveling right now, and that is a major issue. We are working through the administration in terms of working with the health department. Public health is first and foremost. We are concerned about the challenges of outdoor dining going into September, October, November, and the winter time. As you saw today, nothing could be open because of the storm. We'll have more than 35 days of rain in a typical fall. Most days after October will be under 50 degrees. So we're very concerned about how do we support our restaurants and our hotels that don't have outdoor dining to accommodate the visitors who are coming. We're about 30 to 40% occupancy, and the city is doing better than our competitive set, New York, D.C., and Boston. And so we don't want to lose that momentum. Understanding that this pandemic is unpredictable, uncertain, and we're watching how other cities have got it wrong. So we're really proud of our health commissioner and the state's health commissioner. There needs to be more to be done. This is a long-term problem that's going to take us many, many, many months, and us working together to really accommodate how do we successfully get through this part of the pandemic, and then also to the eventual, God willing, the inoculation, so that way we can get back to inclusive growth.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilmember Squilla. Jeff, for that all of the witnesses that testified. We appreciate your time, patience. Look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Have a good afternoon.